the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning and welcome to Talk, the home of common sense, this slightly grey and rainy Monday, but you know, we're all taking a bit of a break between the sunshine. Let's not wish away the heat wave and the summer, folks, not just yet. Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, it's great to have your company. Lots and lots to talk about today, and if you do miss anything at all, don't forget you can go to my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Don't know how they came up with that. You can hit subscribe and you will never miss a thing. You won't want to miss anything on the show today. We're going to be talking about a wealth tax, according to the former Labour leader, Neil Kinnock, now Lord Kinnock, who was on TV yesterday. Labour is willing to explore bringing in a new wealth tax. This would be, say, a 2% tax on assets worth more than 10 million quid. We're told it could help to raise some £10 billion a year for the Treasury. Trouble is, that doesn't really touch the size of the explosion even in the welfare bill. So will that make a difference? Meanwhile, of course, the Prime Minister, after giving way last week on the welfare bill in his anniversary week, is facing a fresh backbench revolt. Now they realise they can get away with anything they want, after the Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, said the government refused to guarantee millions of children the legal right to special education needs support in school. This now costs taxpayers a whopping £12 billion a year. It's been, just like we've seen with adult claims for disability and sickness, a huge explosion in that. Are our children suddenly gaining all these special needs? Something going on? Is there something in the water? Or is there something else going on? We'll talk about all of that. Plus, Britain's top police chiefs have today urged their officers to crack down on cannabis use. The head of the College of Policing, Sir Andy Marsh, said the smell of the dog is a sign of crime and disorder, which makes even him feel unsafe. I mean, it's almost like it's a mad idea, isn't it, asking the police to actually enforce the sodding laws we've already got? Who knew? Plus, Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner has been accused of plotting to censor workplace banter by deploying a network of spies in businesses across the country. This is Soviet Union stuff, guys. Under the new laws drawn up by the Deputy PM, firms will be pressured into bankrolling diversity officers whose job would include protecting staff from the content of overheard conversations. I'm going to be handing my notice in on the day that becomes law, because I'm not sure I'm going to last even a couple of weeks under that. And you probably won't either. All that coming up, plenty more besides, so much to talk about. And joining me, I'm delighted as always on a Monday to be joined by commentator Sam Armstrong. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Do you reckon you'd survive under the banter police?
For about 5 minutes.
I mean, genuinely. I'm thinking, by the time I've got out the lift, before I've walked to my desk, I reckon I could have been sacked 8 times. Easy.
On my way in on a Monday, I have to walk past your desk before I get to everyone else. We normally start the conversation about the madness in the news at 15 to 20 paces, so the spies won't have to listen in hard.
Yeah. Sam, what do you think about this? Well, actually, we're going to be talking to someone who definitely wouldn't pass muster a little bit later in the show. His name's Montgomery Thoms. You may have seen on social media, he was arrested. It took 11 police. He wasn't resisting arrest, he was just standing there peacefully wearing a sign, a billboard. On his billboard, it said, it was a picture of the trans flag, not the pride flag, the specific turquoise, white and pink trans flag, and he put here next to it equals mental illness. He was arrested by the police for this offensive sign. I'm pretty sure that sign is a statement of fact. Get the handcuffs, but also protected speech in this country. So we'll be talking to him. We'll be live in the studio, I'm delighted to say. Let's talk about, so much to talk about today, but let's start with the 20th anniversary of 7/7. 52 people killed, 800. People often forget about the 800 injured, many of them very severely, losing limbs and in a terrible, devastating impact on their lives. In the worst ever terror attack on UK soil, obviously beside Lockerbie, which took place obviously the bombing over UK soil, but those of us who lived in London and still do at the time, really just devastating. I'm sure that many people like me, you know, knew people in London. I remember my husband used to get buses around that area where we had 3 explosions in tube stations, in tube lines, and we also had the bus, a double-decker bus that was that the bomb exploded on there. And I remember not being able to reach my husband for about 3 hours, and you know, thinking he was very likely to have been on that bus or nearabouts, and being as worried as I'm sure so many millions of other people were as well. It was an extraordinary, extraordinary day. There's an anniversary service today, and the King has sent a message to the nation, calling on the nation to remember the extraordinary courage and compassion in the face of the horror, and talking about the spirit of unity. I can vividly remember walking from Westminster home that night, because of course there was no public transport at that point, and walking along Pall Mall. It was completely eerie because everyone was just walking, just thousands of people walking, not a sound, everyone just walking. And I remember getting on the tube the next day and everyone looking around and giving each other, here we go, we're going on again. Should we, though, spend less time remembering these things and more time acting to prevent future attacks?
Well, I think there's a real question as to what it is that we're remembering. And so many of our politicians, and the King, I think, has to fit into this, but our politicians have other responsibilities, are all there to remember the tragedy and the spirit of coming togetherness and all of this that has been said. But let's be very clear about what we do need to remember. We need to remember that these attacks were launched by 4 men who lived in this country, second-generation immigrants.
Born in this country.
Who had been radicalised in a British bookshop, as it was called, but an Islamic centre, basically, and came to hate the very idea of this country. Those ideas that they held are, regrettably, held by, according to MI5, thousands upon thousands of people in this country. And that threat from Islamic terrorism remains today, by a country mile, the single biggest threat to the security of this country.
Yeah, stop going on about the far right.
Let's be very clear. Over 90% of people on the MI5 watch list are Islamic terrorists. Yeah. The vast majority of plots that are stopped, Islamic terrorists.
More than 40 have been stopped in the last... But not just some bloke sitting on the internet. We're talking about 40 serious plots to maim and kill. We've seen many more since. We had London Bridge attack. I mean, I can see, you know, where it happened out the window here. We had the Westminster Bridge attack, the Manchester Arena attack, you know, children as young as 7 killed in that, little girls having fun, deliberately targeted. This is very real. We've seen it. We see it across Europe as well. When people talk about, you know, don't look back in anger. Yeah. I'm angry. I'm still angry. I'm still angry that anyone lost their life or lost a limb. This was a point when police and security services kind of had to get their act together to realise how serious that threat was. It seems to me, though, that politicians have not. And instead, what we thought was a great idea was let's import lots more people from countries where these views are rife, and let's not vet anybody. Let's just let people in, and then let's just see what happens. I don't think, going out on a limb here, it's worked out too well.
Look, the reality is far too many of Britain's migrant community hold views of hostility towards our country. They do not like...
But let's not set the net so wide. We're talking about Muslims. We're talking about a minority of Muslims, the vast majority, not the minority of Muslims, but a very sizable minority of Muslims in this country hold views which are completely antithetical to British values and want to change everything about this country and hate this country. We need to accept that. I don't understand, though, why those people are still in the country. That's the bit I don't understand.
Well, Julia, we cannot get anybody out of this country. We cannot get child rapists out of this country. There are more than 50 convicted terrorists who have been released from prison at the end of their sentence, who have not been deported, having raised human rights challenges to their deportation. These are people who are convicted of terrorist plots, terrorist acts, terrorist attacks in some cases, and we can't get them out of our country.
And this thing, people often say, oh, this isn't the day to talk about it. Well, it was too soon for the first 20 years, was it? I remember even just after the Manchester Arena attack, literally the next day, saying, can we stop having vigils? Can we stop laying flowers and lighting candles and do something to prevent the next 7-year-old girl being blown up because she wants to go to a Ariana Grande concert? I mean, that's the reality to me, and I really think we are in a different territory now where people have just said, yeah, enough is enough. And we see these terrorists, lone wolf actors, who are virtually impossible to stop, as we've discovered. Your Axel Ruder Cabanas, your lone wolf attackers who just don't go drive a car into people, putting some barriers up on a bridge. Great. Well, they'll go to the next bridge then. That's what they do. It does seem to me that, yeah.
But let's be clear. I mean, they've just put in a massive new barrier around the House of Lords, around the Houses of Parliament. It's the most hideous and ugly thing on earth. But that ugliness, to me, represents something, which is that we have had to fortify our entire country. We have had to change the way that we live. We've had to, every time you go through an airport, is a very real reminder that each of us, every single person in this country, is making great sacrifices in order to deal with the fact that we have a population within this country that, as we have said, actively hate us and are prepared to transform that hate into violence perpetrated against any representative.
We're not supposed to say
country.
it quite a bit out loud. But we just did, because that's the point of this station. So, if you want to call in and have your thoughts on this, I would very much appreciate them. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000, because, again, I just think lighting candles and having remembrance services doesn't really pass muster for an awful lot of us anymore. Look, I want to talk about that, but I also want to talk about wealth tax, and I would like people to get in touch on that as well, because Labour, we are told, is willing to explore bringing in a new wealth tax on multi-millionaires to help pay for, well, let's face it, the rise in welfare costs, because that is the ballooning, exploding costs in our society. This is what Lord Neil Kinnock had to say, former Labour leader, paved the way really for Tony Blair's victory back in 1997. But he says that Labour is willing to explore this. Now, there's a lot said that actually Keir Starmer's government is not looking at this, but we know that all the trade unions are very much in support of this. 5 trade unions, the Unison Union, USDOR, for the Fire Brigades Union, NASUWT, Teaching Union, and Unite. I mean, these are some of the big unions, the paymasters of the party and of many MPs, and particularly, of course, Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister. They think, wealth tax is the answer. What's your reaction to that? I'd love to know. I mean, let's face it, I think most of us probably not directly impacted by that, but is it the answer? Multimillionaires paying for the rise in welfare costs. What's your reaction? 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk and your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. And of course, calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost 1, standard network rate message. One of the numbers thrown around by Neil Kinnock was if the top 1%, not top 1%, people worth more than 10 million quid in assets, he said you could raise another £10 billion a year for the Treasury by a 2%, apologies, trying not to sneeze while I'm talking, sorry, a 2% tax on their assets. Apologies. The latest summer cold. £200,000 a year that would raise, but it would be every year, and it assumes, of course, those assets are realisable. I suppose if it's stocks and shares, yes, but then you've got a load of people presumably selling off their stocks and shares. But we're already losing millionaires at a ridiculous and very alarming rate, are we not, in this country? Is a wealth tax the answer?
Look, there are 2 economic concepts which sound quite attractive but fail each and every time: rent controls and wealth taxes. I'm not the biggest Thatcherite on earth, but these 2 ideas have been tried time and time again, and every time they come in, they have exactly the opposite effect for what you would like to see. The UK has already lost 16,500 millionaires in the last year. So that's people who are millionaires, 16,500 of them have fled the UK.
The trade union leaders, and it will go, well, good riddance to them.
Well, good riddance to them, but Julia, every time one of them leave, so do all of the taxes they pay, so do all of the contributions they make to this country, and the rest of us get left a little bit poorer. Yeah. If you want to know why it feels like we can't go on holiday as much, if you want to know why it felt like 20 years ago you could have a BMW on the drive and now you have a Honda or something else like that, the massive economic stagnation that has followed the business community, the global business community, fleeing these shores, going to the likes of Dubai, going to even Portugal or Italy that are welcoming them in, is the single biggest factor. Why?
Because this thing, almost 30% of all tax in this country is paid by the top 1%. Now, top 1%, I've got to be honest with you, it's not as rich as you'd think. Certainly by 2022, it's probably gone up more, being worth over, just a good bit over 3 million. It's probably gone up quite a lot since, because people have been making a lot of money on their assets. And there is an element where, you know, people's wages have stagnated, but you know, people making money from shares, not shares, that has gone up. Bearing in mind, if you've got a pension of any sort, you're also helping, you're making money from that. But I mean, and I know that since austerity, taxes on the rich have gone up.
Yep.
They already pay a lot of tax, and they are paying more tax than they used to pay.
Yep.
45 pence in the pound top rate of tax. But this argument is about assets. The people have got assets and they're not being taxed. What's the argument on that?
Well, so these are things that people have. So it might be their stocks and shares. It might be their pension. It might also be their house.
Yeah.
It might be their back garden. And presumably, the taxman isn't going to go and accept your own valuation of what things worth.
40 pence.
So are we going to see HMRC inspectors coming round to see how much silver cutlery you have in the drawers?
The drones. Well, I suppose also it depends. Like, someone could just earn a load of money. They can spend it all, just whatever they want. Wine, women and song. They could waste the rest.
Yeah.
As George Best said. Was it George Best? But they... you know, but if they decide to invest and they do well and they save for their future and for their children and their grandchildren and all of that, but, you know, improve their home, etc., then they will be facing this asset tax.
And of course, this is money that they have already paid taxes on.
That's the key for a lot of people,
This is the government coming back to have a second bite of the cherry. And look, another factor, it won't be as many as the inheritance tax changes, but for farmers in the southeast of England, if it's going to be based on the potential value, if you turned your farm into a load of housing estates, are we going to see farmers hit with a £200,000 a year additional tax on top of it?
And finding that money at that time again, and that's things like, you know, the tax on property, and people, you know, you purchase a home, or when you sell a home, you know, people have kind of got that money. I've always thought that tax should be paid by the person, you know, selling the home, not the person buying it anyway. But yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, because you may agree with the trade unions and Neil Kinnock. Oh, the rich aren't taxed enough. The rich have got richer, but they are paying more tax as a result, and their rates of tax have gone up. I'm kind of the view, you know, the 45% tax, and you've got, you know, national insurance on top of that for a large portion of it. I'm thinking that's a reasonable level of tax. I mean, I would say too much level of tax. I think once you're going over taking more than 50% of someone's income, which you do for certain of those income brackets, that seems to me to be wrong, that taking more than half of what someone has. And we've already seen, haven't we, with doctors in the NHS, when they've got those pension pots, that actually you think, oh, well, people aren't going to give up working, they're still earning. But they go, no, it's not worth my while, because I'm having so much of it taken away. I can't put it in my pension pot. What's the point? And people stop earning, they stop working, they stop paying tax, but also they stop running business. They don't set up the next business, they don't set up. And as we know, they leave the country. When Francois Hollande came into France, the president then, something like a 70% tax. Literally, people were packed up at the airport and they left. That's what happens. We know that's what happens because it happens every time a country does it.
And of course, in this case, we're not actually talking about just people, we're talking about assets. So if you own a bunch of British companies, what is to stop you tomorrow selling them, moving them overseas, buying up different companies, and you know, you might want to have a factory in Middlesbrough making something, but under this facility that you're going to get taxed 2% of the total value of that that property every year. So why not set up the business in Dubai? Why not set up the business in the Far East?
Or probably somewhere like Ireland, which would probably be the country that would most move to try and benefit from that. Can I also talk about, allied to that, again, is the fact that we've got massive benefits bill. We've got disability benefits, sickness benefits. They have ballooned to a ridiculous level, where we're having mobility cars given out to people who've got tennis elbow, for goodness sake. Absolute madness. But we've also got now, we're facing, the Prime Minister facing another revolt after he basically gave in completely, absolutely just totally gave up completely over that welfare pretend tiny reform over special educational needs. Now, this is a SENDS, a special education needs and disabilities, and it's a system of schools, and it's a nightmare for parents who've got a child with genuine disability. It really is. But we have seen an explosion, yet again, in recent years, of children claiming this for ADHD, autism, and the like. Now, do we suddenly have an explosion of children getting this? Is it just that the system has become more simple and more easy? Or are some people playing the system, or frankly, in a lot of cases, there are kids who absolutely have those problems and absolutely need help, or we have a parenting fail on a grand scale, which is what I think a lot of this is, I'm afraid, in terms of just the kind of background and the kind of routine you impose in your family life. But we're looking at £12 billion a year cost for this. This is off the scale. This is unsustainable.
I'm going to lose some friends here, but I've spoken to a lot of teachers, and every single primary school teacher I meet tells me that they have half a dozen, if not more, kids in their class all of a sudden coming in with ADHD diagnosis. Let me be quite clear. If your little Eddie goes into class, cannot concentrate, pulls the hair of the girl in front of him, throws things around, kicks off when his teacher asks him to read and write and do his basic stuff, the chances are it is not due to a medical condition. It is due to the fact that you sit there at home with him on his screens all day long, with flashing lights and all the rest of it coming along. It is due to the fact that you feed him sugar and sweets and everything you are told not to. And it is due to the fact that he isn't getting enough exercise. You aren't putting him down to bed at a time. Do your job as a parent.
Thank you.
Do not go to the government, demand that he is certified with a medical condition that he doesn't have, in many cases have him medicated, which is terrible for kids. Do the basics of parenting, parent him in precisely the way that you were brought up, that children for generations in this country have been brought up, and don't burden us with the cost, and don't abuse your kid by telling him he's got a medical condition when in actual fact he's just brought up.
He's just got poor parents, you rubbish parents, you're not being... But also the crucial thing, and again, it's the same with disability benefits, if we're giving help to everybody, we're not targeting the help on the children who genuinely do need that help and really do have those issues. Lots more to talk about that. I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. I'm going to take a quick break and then we are going to be getting to your calls. Give us a call. This is Talk. wasn't a surprise to me that Keir Starmer decided to U-turn on the grooming gang scandal. This was a subject which exploded.
The most sickening, disgusting thing that I've seen this government do was the cover-up, and it is a cover-up, I'm sorry, over the grooming gangs, the rape gangs. How dare our Prime Minister turn around and say calls for a national inquiry into a sexual genocide, the most horrific scandal that's ever befallen this country, ever, ever, ever in history.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Well, the lights are on very much on the phone board there. You're obviously wanting to have your say. Love to hear your thoughts on all the topics we are talking about. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. Let's go to some of your text messages and your tweets about the wealth tax. What is your reaction to Labour being willing to explore bringing in a new wealth tax on multimillionaires? Lucy says, stop taxing those who create jobs or they'll flee the UK. Taxing people to oblivion is not the answer. Lee says, get yourself and your wealth out of the UK before it's too late. Grant says, which millionaires? They've all run away already. David said, how about stop giving MPs overly inflated pay rises? No other job would give you a pay rise and allow you to keep your job from messing up again and again and again. MPs' pay can contribute towards welfare instead. Yeah, it doesn't touch the size. There's not enough, I'm afraid. Frederick says, if I were a millionaire, I'd be moving from the UK to my second house, wherever that may be. Labour seems to forget these millionaires have the finances to move anywhere in the world. They absolutely will. Also, I've always just been of that view. Do you know what? If people have become that rich, everyone goes, oh, they didn't deserve it. Well, if it was so easy, we'd all be multi-millionaires or billionaires, wouldn't we? And last time I looked, when I was getting the tube to work this morning, we weren't. Let's go straight to the phone lines. Ian is in the Wirral. Hello, Ian. What do you want to say?
Hi, good morning, Julia. Thanks for taking my call.
Thank you for calling.
Your conversation... Yeah, you're welcome. Your conversation this morning made me think of a saying my late father used to have in respect of taxes. He always said that the poor have nothing. There's nothing to take from them. The really rich, and I mean the rich, not people who have a one-bedroom more in their house than you, they can move their money and go. And, and I understand that, and they pay a vast amount of tax. He always felt they will always come for the middle ground. Yeah. With the mortgages and their loans, you can't go anywhere.
No, most of us can't move. We don't want to. We don't live that sort of.
No.
But here's the thing: when you look at, say, countries like France and Germany, Sweden, or you think, oh, those public services work well, they're doing well. Their basic rates of tax, the tax that everybody pays pretty much, are way higher than ours. People forget that those things. You actually, and in fact, you've got the Institute of Fiscal Studies and others pointing out, there aren't enough rich people to pay for all the things that we apparently think that we should get paid for by the state. You have to tax middle earners.
Is it not the highest rate of taxation in living memory that we're living in at the moment?
Yep. And it's going to go up. Do you have any expectation that you're going to, be better off come the autumn budget?
Not at all. I live on an ex-services pension, and I also work part-time as well.
Yeah.
The other thing is that my pension age has risen twice in the last few years. So I have a genuine fear that a realistic retirement is not on the horizon. Yeah,
well, that's a fair point. Do you mind me asking how old you are?
I'm 64 in 2 months.
Oh, right. Yeah, well, I mean, I'm in my 50s. I keep saying to my younger colleagues, like you lot, 70 plus is when you're going to retire. Don't start getting too hopeful. Thank you very much, Ian. Thank you for that. Daniel is on the line. He's in Epsom. And Daniel, you want to talk about the 77th anniversary, don't you?
Morning. How you doing?
Morning. Very well, my lovely. Lovely to talk to you.
And you, darling. Do you know what? I want to talk about 77, but what I want to do is take a step back from that. And I want to say that, in 1997, I was in my mid to late teens, right? And there were zero on the Islamic terror watch list. So when 7/7 happened, that number was about 25,000, right? and now it's 47,000, okay, on the Islamic terror watch list. If we keep...
And then, by the way, they're not watching, most of those people, because they haven't got the resources. They're just wandering around, hating us and wanting us to die.
Yeah, so there's a direct correlation between the amount of immigration you have from the Islamic third world and then subsequent terrorist attacks and threat, okay? That's obvious and clear just by looking at the numbers.
And across Europe as well, yeah.
Yeah, and across Europe as well. So why is this government and successive governments continuing to allow immigration from the Islamic third world? It's a threat. It's a threat. It might not be all of them. We have to caveat that every time.
But it's not all of. It's not.
Yeah,
that's the thing. It's not.
Yeah, but why? We all feel the need to caveat it every single time. Oh, we have to caveat it. I'm bored of caveating things. I just want to tell the truth. And I can see the decline and degradation in our society. Yep. I can see a ton of issues that we didn't used to have.
Yeah, oh, no, I mean, as Sam pointed out, every single time that I can't take a bottle of water. My moisturiser's 120 millilitres, so I can't take that in my airport bag. Every time I'm having to take my shoes off before I get on a plane, I'm like, when I had my daughter when she was a baby, having to taste the milk and thinking, really, why am I doing this? Why am I queuing up for an hour and a half? Oh, now I know why.
Yeah, but it's just, Julia, it's wider than that. It's just the ruination of Britain. I'm sick of it. How can we get rid of this government? I can't wait. You know what? In 3 or 4 years' time, the majority of Britons are going to go out and vote reform because we're sick of the inaction and we're sick of the decline. I'm absolutely sick of it.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think an awful lot of people do feel that way. Thank you very much, Daniel. Appreciate that. 10:33 is the time. We'll put that and all the other topics to our next guest in just a couple of moments. Former Deputy Prime Minister of this country, Damien Green, Conservative, but he was also Work and Pension Secretary. Get his thoughts on the battles over the huge costs of welfare and the ballooning costs, and who should pay for it? Is it the millionaires or the rest of us? Do get in touch on that. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to the show. 10:35 is the time. This is Talk. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Sam Armstrong's still with me. Delighted to be joined right now by Damien Green, former Deputy Prime Minister, also former Work and Pension Secretary for the Conservatives. A very good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. I suppose these two stories are very much kind of sort of interlinked, aren't they? Labour apparently willing to explore a wealth tax, according to Neil, now Lord Kinnock. But also at the same time, we've got more Labour backbench rebellions being expected and likely probably to be supported by the unions and others over latest issue in welfare, and that is this special education needs support. And this idea that, well, let's get the rich to pay for everything. Let's not cut benefits. How do those two stories tally with you?
You're quite right. They hang together, and the sort of link is that once a government has given way to a backbench rebellion, then there are going to be more backbench rebellions. All history tells us that. Yeah. And so this government is now running scared of its own backbenchers because of the way the election fell. There are hundreds of Labour backbenchers with very small majorities. They spread their vote very efficiently, which is why they've got such a big majority with such a small share of the vote. So you've got a lot of very nervous Labour backbenchers, and discipline has broken down. So they know that the government is not going to be able to push through any reforms or any spending cuts. And so the government is desperately looking for new taxes. The one thing we know about a wealth tax, because they've been tried in other parts of the world, is that they don't work. And I think they progressively won't work the further on we go in life and we have a more globalized economy, that rich people who think they're being overtaxed will just go live somewhere else.
Yeah, and again, as we were just talking, Sam Armstrong and myself, we know that because they literally do it. We can see it. We can see the huge exodus right now. We've seen it in every country where it's happened. And when you cut those taxes, it comes forward. Do you understand, though, the sense of sort of unfairness a lot of people feel, that the squeezed middle saying where everything comes on us, but there he is on his yacht with his three homes, and yeah, he's done well for himself, but he can afford to give up, one of those homes or a few $100,000, whereas I can't afford to give any money up because I'm struggling to pay my mortgage that has been going up in recent years, and I'm struggling to pay the bills, struggling to pay the energy costs. A lot of people just feel like that's not fair, and why should we be cutting benefits? We're told, for the people on the lowest incomes, when the rich are swanning around on the yachts. That's the argument that people feel. Do you have any sympathy for that?
Well, I can see why it's popular. I think you just have to be sort of fairly hard-headed about this, not hard-hearted, because people with genuine disabilities, people with genuine disadvantages in life ought to get help. That's part of a civilized society. The problem is that we are now giving benefits, which we call disability benefits, to an ever-rising proportion of the population, particularly the working age population, and simply we can't afford it. We cannot carry on like this as a country. And I think the route for my party, the Conservative Party, is to be very realistic with people and say we cannot have everything that we've had in the past and spread it to ever more people, because otherwise we're going to tax ourselves out of existence and life will get more unfair.
Well, the key thing, certainly with adult disability and sickness benefits, I just think it's completely unfeasible that we have seen such a rise in the level of disability and sickness. We know the largest chunk of the rise has actually been people claiming mental health incapacity. Why somebody's got mental health incapacity need to have a mobility car is utterly beyond me in the first place. But we're talking about huge sums of money. In the case of some people on the higher rate, an extra $12,000 a year, tax-free. People have had to earn money to pay taxes to pay that for people. And I'm sorry, I, like most people in this country, simply do not accept that we've seen that explosion. It's completely different to any other country across Europe and the Western world. It's obviously people who they're either milking the system or they have been led to believe falsely that they have a problem which requires extra money rather than going to work and organising and getting on with their life. What do you make in the case of children, though? Because I think a lot of people will be very, very, very protective over children with special educational needs. I don't think there'll be anybody listening or watching the show who doesn't know somebody with a child who has those needs, who does actually need that extra help, where they really struggle in a normal state school. They need that extra help and get that language or speech therapy. But we have, again, same with the adult benefits, a huge explosion in the number of children who've been statemented, as it's called, where they've got these statements, and then there is a duty of care from the local education authority, and we're looking at £12 billion a year going on these special education need children. Again, unsustainable, but how do we make sure that the kids who need it get it, and the kids whose parents need to do a better job of parenting don't get it.
I think both for adults and children, the solution is in the testing, because we all agree that people who really need help should get help. But we also, I think by and large, the country agrees that far too many people are now getting those types of help, whether it's special educational needs help or benefit help. In benefits, one of the things that's happened is that we don't do face-to-face interviews as much anymore. We do it by phone, where it's much easier to play the system, to put it politely. In terms of special educational needs, the way it's been rationed in the past is just by delay, as you say. Parents want to get this EHCP, the old statement it used to be called, but it now takes months and months and sometimes years to get one.
Which it shouldn't for children in need.
Absolutely. So I would have a rigorous testing system. It might be tougher. I wouldn't, my piece of advice to the government would be, don't take anything away that people have already got, because you've seen what happens with your original.
No, I couldn't disagree with you more.
Stop it growing.
No, but again, this is the same with every political party. Is this absolute unwillingness to face the music and to say, I'm sorry, I don't think your child needs this. I mean, the reality is, in a lot of these cases, and I know people who talk to me about having done this, you basically, you find the right, the doctor, the right psychologist, and they're the one who's renowned in the local area for always signing you off. Lovely, jubbly, thank you very much. No. Come on, there's a lot of people playing the system. Once you've got a kid who's statemented like that, whatever the term is now, you're then entitled to a load of other benefits yourself. These are parents who are failing their children, failing the system, and they're living off the backs of other taxpayers, and it's wrong for the child and it's wrong for the taxpayer.
Well, I think it's wrong for the child if the child doesn't need it.
Exactly, if the child doesn't need it. But we could give more help to the children who do need it if people weren't playing the system.
That's why I think the original test is the key. And you make a good point. If people know that there's a particular medical professional who will always say yes, then word gets around. So actually, one of the things, when I was Secretary of State at DWP, the sick notes, the fit notes, whatever you want to call them, the names change over the years, aren't given by doctors, are given by assessors from the DWP. Now, everyone said, that's sort of heartless, and of course they'll say no. Yeah, but they're objective, whereas if somebody is your GP, they are inclined to be on your side. And if you say you need a benefit, or if you say your child needs a statement, of course you're much more inclined to say yes.
And they've got a 10-minute appointment. That said, apparently my mum, according to some of the callers who've dealt with her when she was a GP, not inclined to do that because she knew it was bad for people to do that where they didn't think they needed it. I mean, this all links in there with all the other benefits being talked about, the two-child benefit cap. Keir Starmer had said before the election they were not looking at scrapping the two-child benefit cap, which unfortunately the Reform MP I spoke to last week, as her approach was under the view was child benefit, as in the money, the 20 quid a week, whatever that people get when you've got a kid. It's completely different. It's access to much bigger array of benefits if you're unemployed or on low income and you've got more than two children. But there's a lot of pressure from the unions, from Labour backbenchers and others saying, we want to get rid of that and scrap that. But we're looking at a multi-billion-pound cost of scrapping that, aren't we?
Yeah, I would keep it. Indeed, Kemi Badenoch said the Conservative Party would keep the two-child limit. I think it's a sensible and practical limit. And I think it's one of the things you can put to all your reform guests is why are they in favour of spending public money in that way? I'm sure you do, because that's a sign of a party that's not serious about controlling public spending. And I fear that while Rachel Reeves, this poor woman who's bursting into tears in public, is trying to hold the line on public spending, for what it's worth, I would suggest it's going to be very, very difficult for her to hold the line on the two-child limit, because her own backbenchers have tasted blood and they will be back for more. And they believe, and this is why profoundly disagree with people on the left. They think that the more benefits you pay out, the more compassionate your society is. And I just disagree with that. I think giving people a helping hand or help when they need it so that they can earn their own living and they're not taxing them too much so that they can keep it and have a decent life because of that, that's the way to a decent, compassionate society.
I couldn't agree with you more on that. Thank you so much for joining us, Damien Green, former Deputy PM for the Conservatives, former Work and Pension Secretary too. Just on the issue of special education needs, I want to sneak a quick call in on this. 0344 499 1000. Lots of you getting in touch after what Sam Armstrong and I are both saying about Labour backbench rebellions, possibly now over special needs support for children. Lewis is on the line and he's in Oxford. Lewis, what do you want to say?
Hi, Julia. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, hear just fine.
Yeah, Julia, I mean, to be honest with you, I'm listening to this, EHCP subject. I think that people have to understand, especially the gentleman you had on with you earlier, that actually some children do need this.
No, okay, I'm going to stop you there, Lewis. Right. This is what really beeps me off about these conversations. We have a conversation where we're saying, lots of kids don't need this, but far too many kids are getting it. And what we need to do is focus the help on the kids who do need it. And the first call I'm going to get on this topic, I always know, will be someone saying, but some kids need it. It's like, yeah, we know that.
Hang on, bear with me. So I'm telling you, children need it. We agree on that topic, okay? However, I think the gentleman you've got with you now is completely right that we're going to tax ourselves out of existence because at £12 billion a year to support this, the funding needs to be available. However, where does this funding come from? We have an issue where we have 500 immigrants coming into this country on average every single day, and these immigrants are draining the resources, and not to mention, maybe some of their children are going into the school system and fraudulently claiming this. So there has to be a cut-off. So the guy that you're sat with now is quite right that the means testing has to be right from the start. The funding has to be available with the correct doctors, the correct psychologists, the correct psychotherapists to enable this means testing to be done. That would eliminate straight away all the fraudulent claims from the people who are, let's be honest, like you said earlier, bad parenting, for the children that genuinely need it, like my daughter.
Yep.
And I'm a taxpayer who pays upwards of £3,000 a month income tax into the system. So why should I now not be able to call on those resources to support my...
But that's what we want. We want, if you genuinely need it and your child genuinely needs it, I want those resources there for you. But they won't be there for you if everybody who doesn't understand the concept of bedtime and vegetables doesn't do their job properly.
Completely agree. So we can probably say 50% of those are fraudulent straight away. So if we could eliminate that 50%, how do we then treat the other 50%? Well, the money isn't going to be there for the other genuine 50% unless we get a hold on immigration.
You think that's the key issue? Very interesting. Lewis, so appreciate your call. I'm going to have to leave it there. I've got to run to a break. Lewis in Oxford, thank you very much indeed. 10:49, I'm going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking about the banter police in your office if Angela Rayner gets her way. That's up next. This is Talk.
Davey, who we haven't seen out and about for ages, and doesn't seem to speak out about very much, was so concerned about this that he was demanding that there was some kind of, national emergency. The heat wave lasted 2 days. It was Monday, it was Tuesday. Yeah, it was a bit hot and it wasn't very nice on the tube. But, there are parts of Britain where people were getting in touch with me going, it's pouring with rain here. Also, it's about 15 degrees. Bring it on. Let's have some global warming.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. 10:52 is the time. Sam Armstrong still with me. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Sam, banter police. We've talked about banter police before coming in the pubs. Landlords having to worry about their bar staff overhearing someone telling a bawdy joke, or even just saying, oh, trans women aren't women in a pub, and getting upset about it. Now there's talk about this happening under the Employment Rights Bill in people's offices and workplaces, having your human resources officers wandering around, diversity officers, checking there aren't people saying things that might upset other people even as they pass by their desk. You and I probably won't be allowed to go in an office ever again, will we?
No, and I'll tell you for why. Because this government is on the ropes, and it is hell-bent on this plan to shut up any criticism of it. And we know precisely which type of views are going to be clamped down on.
Yeah.
We know precisely the sort of politics that people who are going to get cancelled for this are going to have, and it is people that are critical of this government. This is beyond insidious. This is Stasi-esque attempts by a government to employ HR departments, everybody else, to shut down
eventually
critics
we're
everywhere
all going to work in HR or diversity, equity, inclusion. They'll be the only jobs that we actually have. We'll just be a diversity, equity and inclusion department with a country attached. Well, let's talk about this with Alan Price. He's an HR and employment law expert. He's also chief executive of an employment law firm, Bright HR, and he joins us now. Very good morning to you, Alan.
Good morning.
I just want to check, whether or how long we think that Sam and me have actually got before we actually have to leave any workplace. Because I think it's bad enough banter police in the pub, but in the workplace too. Now, one of the things I've really enjoyed about working in the media, particularly newspapers, is the banter. Very, very, very bad language. Lots of fun. Lots of Mickey taking. Lots of that. I've always loved that. It's one of the reasons I've loved the business. That will all have to go under this. But how will it work in an ordinary workplace?
I think this is the problem. We speak to around 70,000 small businesses in the UK, and obviously they want HR support. They want that guidance that you talked about. But when it comes to red tape, it's more and more coming their way. No small business goes into business to think, I'm going to let my employees be harassed. I'm going to get unwanted conduct. And the same for their customers. You can't run a business if your staff don't feel looked after, and you won't have customers if you treat them unfairly. I think the challenge for small businesses is, where does it stop in terms of this red tape?
Yeah. I mean, there's difference, isn't there? Like most people, this idea, one of the words I always hate, when people say someone's been bullied, I always go, what do you mean? And we often see these cases in the newspapers, a tribunal, where someone didn't like, someone wasn't invited on a night out, or someone didn't like someone commenting on the colour of their coat or something. And you're just suddenly into, this is madness. People can't tiptoe around people like that in the workplace. They're trying to just get on with their day. But this is something I find it's interesting. It's part of the Employment Rights Bill, we understand, and it's been pushed by the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner. What I don't understand is I've had a drink with her. I know how she speaks. We've heard her talking about Tory scum in the workplace at a meeting. We've heard her making jokes about her ginger private parts, for goodness sake, herself making those things. So of all the people you'd have thought wouldn't want to police people's language, you wouldn't think it would be Angela Rayner, but it is. But the impact of that on businesses, it's bad enough for the employees, but businesses, it's just another layer of red tape, another reason why you're worried about anyone taking you to an employment tribunal the day after they start work. It becomes untenable to run a business, doesn't it?
And this is it. Obviously, the talk about increased day one rights. Small businesses are fully aware of the Equality Act's been around 15 years now. They know how to treat employees fairly. There was changes last year which put more obligations on them about training their staff and being on the lookout. But the challenge with banter police is, as you said, one person's joke is another person's offence.
Yeah.
And as you said, legal cases aren't free of charge. It may be free for the employee or the claimant to bring a claim, but the employer spends time in defending that, worrying about it.
Yeah.
And as we said before, a small business owner gets up in the morning and wants to do the right thing by the customers and by the staff, and having to think about every comment that's said. And we speak to small businesses all the time, and where do they go? Government should be given really plain English guidance on what's right, what's wrong.
Yeah, and again, I wouldn't sit in an office and put up with someone being sexist or homophobic or racist or even if someone was having a go at someone who believes they were trans. I would step in. I wouldn't allow that to happen. But it is extraordinary the stuff that people get policed over in terms of their language in offices already. This is going to make it even worse. And the responsibility again on the employer, who's just trying to sell widgets and make a profit, employ people, pay some tax and go home.
Well, this is it. You've got the national insurance increase, obviously changes coming with the Employment Rights Bill, and none of this helps. The biggest challenge in the UK economy when we speak to small business owners is productivity. Yeah. How do we get more productive in the wider world they're dealing with? And more red tape, more regulation, more things to worry about. You wake up in the morning, I keep going back to this point about waking up in the morning, it's how are my staff going to react today? How's my customers going to react?
Yeah.
It's perception, isn't it? That's the big challenge in the workplace. One person's offence is another person's joke. And as you said, in media rooms around the world, people will laugh and joke, but it's how that person feels. And none of us want to harass anybody. And the simple question, the common sense rule is, don't treat anyone unfairly. And that's it.
Yeah.
We don't need any more regulation, and small businesses worry about it every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I know so many people who run small business who say, it's not even worth it anymore. I'm being taxed to the hill. I have to spend so much time and money dealing with the HR thing, the diversity thing, which your net zero this, which I don't have any time to actually run my business and get everyone working. And again, with the Employment Rights Bill, all these rights coming in on day one, not being able to just basically try someone out for size to see whether they're actually, going to fit in and whether they're actually going to be a good employee. Everyone can bluff it in an interview. A lot of people can't bluff it for the first 6 months. And that's the reality. And we know, though, everyone knows they work in offices where there are people who are swinging the lead. Come on. And then you're going to have someone who's going to get sacked, and then they're going to say, oh, I overheard a joke that X told Y, and now I'm going to go to tribunal.
And this is it. Everyone's going to be keeping more records to defend themselves. Everyone's going to be more worried about what they said. But if you've got a business with, say, 6 or 7 staff, that's the backbone of the UK economy, over 1 million SMEs in the UK. Who in the business is going to do it? There's a husband and wife, a partner, a brother or a sister.
Yeah.
One of them's on the till, one of them is to producing the goods, the widgets we talked about earlier. Where's this extra person that's going to keep
Oh, yeah, exactly. Again, if you've got a big multinational corporation, you've got a whole team of these people, but no one else does. Adam Price, very good point. Thank you. But keep up the good work. Chief Executive of Bright HR and Employment Law Firm. I mean, this is the thing, isn't it, Sam? It's just that small businesses. But again, the people in government, they don't run businesses, so they don't understand.
Yeah, and what's going to be the effect? We're just going to have fewer businesses. They're going to move overseas. We're all going to be poorer.
Ta-ta. Oh, no, we'll have to tax those rich more that we've been talking about, and then we won't be able to help the people who need special education needs and others. Get in touch. I want to hear your thoughts on all of this. This is Talk.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning and welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Great to have your company, and whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, it is great to have your company. Don't forget, if you've missed any of the show already, or you have to go out now, you're going to miss any of the show, you can always go to our website, not just the YouTube page, which is talkTV, but also you can go to the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show YouTube page. It cunningly called, so you can find it easily. If you hit subscribe, you will never miss a thing. Lots coming up in this hour, including Labour apparently being willing to explore bringing in a new wealth tax. Former Labour leader Lord Kinnock has suggested a 2% tax on assets worth more than 10 million quid could help raise some £10 billion a year for the Treasury. Brilliant, until all those people worth more than 10 million quid leave the country. And then what are we going to do? Isn't the answer, actually, we need to cut some of the welfare we're paying out, not just disability and sickness benefits, but also some of these special education need benefits that are going out to kids who sometimes, let's be honest, don't need that extra help in education. What they need is, well, parents who actually give them a bedtime and, you know, healthy food and lots of physical activity and all those things that actually help a child actually do well. If they don't actually have one of the issues that genuinely does mean they have those disability needs. We're going to talk about that. Plus, Britain's top police chiefs have today urged their officers to crack down on cannabis. What? Police enforcing the law? This will never catch on. But the head of the College of Policing, Sir Andy Marsh, has said the smell of the drug is a sign of crime and disorder, which makes even him feel unsafe. Plus, we're going to be talking about Reform MP James McMurdoch, one of 5 Reform MPs. He resigned from the party over the weekend, resigned from the party whip over allegations about his business propriety during the pandemic. And then there were 4. Once again, it's almost like, will they ever get 4-5, 4-5, 4-5? There we are. Plus, we're also going to be talking about Keir Starmer's supposed flagship one-in, one-out policy with France to tackle the small boats crisis. Emmanuel Macron is arriving tomorrow for a state visit. But the plan was to announce that we were going to have this policy where we'll send back all of our migrants, but we'll have assessed asylum seekers we'll take from France in return. Looks though like the European Commission is going to scupper that because they're not quite sure what's going to happen to those migrants once they're sent back to France. They think they'll end up being sent back to countries like Greece and Italy and Spain, who also don't want them. We'll talk about all of that and plenty more besides. Don't forget also, coming up in an hour, we're going to be talking to Montgomery Toms. He is the young man, Christian activist, who stood at the Pride in London parade at the weekend with a big placard, a billboard on him saying, with a picture of the trans flag, the pink, blue and white one. Difficult to keep up with the flags, I understand, but that's just the one relating to trans, with that trans flag equals mental illness. That was what was on his sign. He ended up getting arrested. He's now been bailed. He's going to be in the studio in an hour's time. But extraordinarily, took 11 officers to arrest him. You'd think they'd have something better to do, like, I don't know, arresting people for real, actual crimes rather than attacking our freedom of speech. Well, we'll talk about all of that and plenty more besides. I do want to hear from you on any of the topics we're talking about. What's definitely getting your interest today is, one, wealth tax. This is something that Lord Kinnock mentioned in an interview yesterday, former Labour leader. He says that Labour is willing to explore bringing in a new wealth tax on multi-millionaires. He suggested people worth over 10 million quid in assets. There aren't that many of them. And by the way, they leave the country if you do tax them too hard. He reckons that will help pay a lot of the bills, like the rise in welfare costs. This, as the Prime Minister has basically done a full U-turn last week on those welfare payments for disability and sickness, despite the huge explosion. They're not even going to be tackling the people coming on soon, let alone the people who've already got on and are swinging the lead. We're also facing demands from the unions and Labour backbench MPs who now smell blood in the water over things like scrapping the 2-child benefit cap, which would be an insane policy, which madly Nigel Farage seems to support. Plus, calls for there to be some cuts to the special educational needs, which are going to huge number of children, massive increase again in the last few years in children getting those. Surely the key thing is that we should be making sure that children who need those benefits are getting them, but actually where children don't need them, they're not I know, it's a crazy idea. Will it ever catch on? I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. You can text us on 87222. You can get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost £1, standard network rate message. Let's introduce you now once again to my guest joining me all today. He is, of course, Sam Armstrong, joins us always on a Monday morning. Morning once again to you.
Good morning.
I want to touch on the 7/7 anniversary before we go further forward. 20th anniversary today, big service taking place in London. We've got lots of important figures taking, the Prime Minister, London Mayor, I think the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh attending on behalf of the King, a statement from the King. It's the worst ever terror attack on UK soil, 52 dead, more than 800 injured, many of those very severely injured, losing limbs and having life-changing injuries. We were discussing earlier, and let's keep this brief because there's so much else we want to get to, that actually, as awful as this is, and it's important to remember this attack, there's 3 bombs on 3 tube chains, bomb on a double-decker bus, devastating. I mean, people in London, I think it took us a long time, people who weren't involved at all, a long time to sort of feel safe on public transport again. We had another foiled attack only 2 weeks later. We have tens of thousands of people on the terror watch list still. Massively ballooning since that attack, or wake-up call. We are still facing a huge threat from Islamic jihadism, a growing threat, some would say. Do we need to have a little less remembering and lighting of candles and vigils and remembrance services, and a little more taking proper practical action to stop these people from doing this ever again?
Julia, to be honest with you, having watched, there's 2 documentaries, one on Netflix, one on the BBC, about this attack, I would accept remembering the victims, because having watched those documentaries, the biggest problem in them was not the fact that 50+ people were killed, not the fact that 800 people were murdered. The vast chunk of both of those documentaries pointed that the biggest problem, the worst effect of this tragedy, was that it led to a perceived blowback by the Muslim community in this country. Time and time again, we were said the problem with this attack was that it led to racism. Now, of course, every bit of racism is awful, but actually, we need to remember that 50 people were killed, and tens of people in series of incidents again and again and again since have been killed by Islamic terrorists in this country. It is a serious problem. It is the
single biggest threat to our
country. It has not got better. In fact, it's got worse. And the authorities, the media, far too many people outside of this channel are determined to shut down any conversation of it. And it's an outrage to those 50 people who we remember were brutally murdered 20 years ago.
Absolutely, absolutely. Your thoughts on that very welcome. 0344 499 1000. We like to say it as it is, not for the sake of it, because I'm paying tribute to the people who lost their lives, the incredible heroism on the day, the unity, all of that. But lighting candles will not keep the next person alive if they are under threat. We should be, the number one issue should be preventing the next attack. And the reality is we have tens of thousands of people walking amongst us, living amongst us, many born in this country, who hold views which are a danger to us. They genuinely believe that this country is a terrible place and that they would be willing to die for their extremist religious views. And we've imported either their parents or them to this country. We have hate preachers in mosques and Islamic centres day after day. We have organisations. We've got the issue with Palestine Action, people claiming they're supporting Gaza. 29 arrests at the weekend, which I thought was a very, very good thing. Police actually doing their job. Shocker for a prescribed organisation, just a day after it was banned by the authorities after a vote in Parliament. People say, oh no, we oppose genocide in Gaza. A, there isn't genocide in Gaza, and B, you can be worried about the people who are dying, who are innocent people in Gaza, without supporting a prescribed terrorist group. These things are not the same.
If you were an organisation that launches attack on British Air Force assets, you are terrorists. In fact, prescription, your group being banned, and frankly none of you getting rounded up and jailed is in my view, frankly, too lenient approach to an organisation as insidious as that.
And they apparently, we'll talk about it a little bit later, they've apparently set up a secret website for people to get in touch. I mean, again, sorry, you've got no business doing any of this. Let's talk about where we are in terms of wealth tax. Lord Kinnock on telly yesterday, the man who brought Labour to a level of sanity where they got elected under Tony Blair in the first place, but didn't get elected himself as Prime Minister. but despite 2 attempts. He said that Labour is willing to explore a wealth tax. Now, it's kind of been quietly poo-pooed a little bit by the number 10 Downing Street staff, but the reality is there is a huge amount of money that is going out of government coffers, our taxpayers' money, onto an awful lot of things like benefits of various different kinds, and there simply isn't money to pay for it. No one at all in this country who is sane thinks that taxes aren't going to go up in the autumn. Rachel Reeves says she cries through her next budget. £20 billion black hole, 22 billion was it? It's now become basically a £40 billion black hole. Well done, despite those tax rises last autumn. We're going to be seeing more this year, and we know we've got the likes of Labour backbenchers, we've got all the trade unions, all the Labour Party, funders. They are desperately keen for a tax on what they call wealth. Suggestion from Neil Kinnock, 2% tax on people with £10 million or more in assets. That would be 200k a year on your assets. Well, again, 5 years, a million of that's gone. But the reality is, long before that millionaire will be gone.
Yeah, I wish it would work. I wish the idea would work. If it was that simple that you could raise money by putting on this tax, I would be all for it. The reality is, each and every time around the world it has been tried, what has it done? It has raised almost no money, and it has destroyed the economy of the country that has attempted it. We know that that's happened. Now, you can't teach these people. They're that ideological. They're that crazed. You can't teach them it.
It's like the idea that if you close down a load of private schools with VAT increases, suddenly all the kids at state schools will just start doing really well. They genuinely believe that.
But look, we have lost 16,500 millionaires in the last year from this country. Each one of them was paying thousands upon thousands of pounds in taxes. They were taking out far less than they were putting in. We have replaced them with people that are taking out far more than they're putting in. But this change will destroy our economy. When Neil Kinnock stood in 1992, it was said that, will the last person in Britain please turn the lights out? It really will be if he gets his way. Will the last millionaire in Britain please pay the electricity meter?
But it's the idea that these people are not already paying tax. We know the top 1% in this country, you don't have to be earning that much. Top 1% have net worth just over 3 million quid. So a lot of people in London and the South East who've made
bought a house, got a pension,
bought a house and a pension may well have those sort of assets. But the top 1%, and again, it's way more than most people. I get that, but the top 1%, they're already paying 30% of all income tax in this country. I think they're paying their way. Taxes for the wealthy have gone up, and 45p in the pound rate. It seems to me there's sort of this idea, they're not paying a load of tax. No, they are. I remember Alan Sugar once actually showing, this is the cheque that I wrote. No, okay, some of them don't do that. They've got assets abroad, it's all in trusts or whatever. This is the cheque I wrote. You're telling me I earn tens of millions of pounds. This is the cheque I wrote to the Exchequer last year. All credit to him.
But Julia, the ways of life, there are realities of life, and one of the realities of life is it's not that unpleasant if you're a millionaire, if you've got 15 million in the bank, if you're doing this and that, to move yourself to Malta or to Portugal or to Italy or to Bermuda, anywhere around the world.
Just some holiday destination suggestions for Judith Chalmers.
Each one of these holiday destinations is setting up their own tax system, though, where they are eagerly trying to attract them, to bring them in. And you have to be so naive to think this will work.
But that's it. It's the politics of sort of envy, isn't it? Rather than, my thing is why don't we try and encourage more people to be able to set up businesses and do well? The reality is, people who've got assets like that, they work really hard. I know some people who are very, very wealthy, and virtually all of them came from absolutely nothing. Absolutely, lived in an absolutely ordinary, normal home, or actually started out with even less than that, and they've worked their cojones off, and they've done really well. I just simply don't, and they pay a hell of a lot of tax. I just don't resent these people at all. I just say, could I come on your yacht, please? But I don't know why people resent those people, because yes, there are some people who, but the weird thing is, no one seems to resent footballers or pop stars or actors earning silly amounts of money. Silly amounts of money. but you're kicking a ball around. But if you're the best at doing it and people want to watch you doing it, then you are worth that amount of money. I don't know why people are so resentful of it.
Well, and remember with wealth taxes, they have already paid income tax on it. So this is taking a second bite out of the cherry.
And here's the thing.
And I don't blame these people
here's the
for
thing,
running
most
away
people,
from
I
it.
hear this all the time from people, and I'll tell people off an audience about the time. People go, I've paid in all my life. No, the vast majority of people in this country will, and we've talked about immigrants being net, not being net contributors, and the latest stats. The vast majority of people in this country will never pay enough tax to cover their pension, let alone the extra help they get from public services and things in this country. The vast majority of us don't earn enough money to do that, and that's a reality check. So when you get to these benefits, so we've got Labour backbenchers, they smelt blood. They now know we can get this number 10 Downing Street to basically cave on anything. They're going to be trying to forcing votes. They want to have the 2-child benefit cap got rid of. So let's really encourage people who don't work, or any one of them. We say some of these people are working. Yeah, Dad's working 2 days a week. Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for that. You've got 5 kids. You probably both need to be doing a 5-day week to pay your costs. I certainly don't see why I should be going to work to pay for your kids. But we want to get rid of that, and we're also talking about the special educational needs, and we get lots of calls coming in on that. And Keir Starmer faces a Labour revolt over this. Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, said on Sunday the government was committed to reforming help for children with learning difficulties and disabilities. £12 billion a year going on that. We've had a massive increase. I think it's a 16% increase in the last year in the number of children. Sorry, 11% increase in the previous year, of the equivalent of almost an entire school year cohort across the country, who are now claiming this extra help. I simply don't believe that there are that many children who need that extra help. I think there are lots of children who need, as you were saying earlier, extra help from their parents to actually, if their parents did a bit of parenting, breakfast in the morning, healthy meals, loads of physical exercise. No, you don't have to join a gym. Take them to the sodding park. Let them run around. A healthy meal in the evening, bedtime, turn off all the gadgets. In fact, if your kid's at primary school, I don't know why your kid's got a gadget at all. I don't even know why they're watching TV until they're at least 4 years old, at the youngest. And you should be reading books to them and spending time with them. I'm sorry, I simply do not, no fizzy drinks, none of that. People started parenting properly, we wouldn't be in this mess in the first place. And we'd be able to help the kids who genuinely do have autism, ADHD, other learning disabilities. We want to be able to give them all the help that they need, and we'd be able to afford to do so because we wouldn't be doing it for another million kids.
Speak to any teacher at any school in this country, they will tell you in each and every class, half a dozen or more now have ADHD diagnoses. We've got to the stage where we've got 700,000 people on these care plans where we're told that they need one-to-one support, that somebody needs to be taken out of the workforce to look after them full-time. Here's the thing. Every other parent who's got kids in a class, who's in the WhatsApp group, knows who those kids are that have got the ADHD diagnosis. They know what the parents are like. They see the snacks they're getting given after school. They see how much time they spend on their screens. They see the fact that it's frankly, the bunch of them, they're all feral. Yep. Look, there have been, for as long as there have been parents around, kids around, bad parents. And there have been kids that are frankly little oiks. People you wouldn't want anywhere near your house. They have now been given the situation, a system by which they can go along to a doctor, and if they don't like what the first doctor says, they can go along to a second one, in which they have a medical excuse for the fact that their children have not been brought up right, need some discipline, often need a strong father figure, and often need to be told, no, you will sit there until you have completed your work. You will eat everything on that plate before you get down. We know that kind of parenting has always worked, has always given us nice children. We know what side has not worked very well. And how have we got ourselves into a situation in which not only are we medicalising kids that there is absolutely nothing wrong with, putting them
which is a tragedy. It's child abuse.
Dangerous drugs that have profound consequences for them for the rest of their life, but have now got to a situation in which the taxpayer is being expected not only to sign off on this stupid, needless certificate, but to pay for worthless support, and in fact, in my view, much of it is worthless for kids for years.
Well, there's lots of evidence actually with a lot of these children, because the ones that don't genuinely have those needs, that actually it's not actually helping those children. You're not seeing those children benefit from it at all. There's so much more I want to talk about. I do want to hear from you. 0344 499 1000 on that. Just briefly, and it sounds trite to this, just briefly, let's talk about what's been going on in Texas with those floods. We know that half a dozen, well, a dozen or more children are known to be missing and are believed to have died from these summer camps. I lived in America as a kid, not in Texas, but if everyone you run off to summer camp, that's what everyone did. And these children at a girls' Christian summer camp on this plain, but it is a floodplain. By this river. This river burst its banks. If you've not seen any of the footage of it, it's just extraordinary. In the space of 45 minutes, this river it just rose the most extraordinary. Tens and tens and tens of feet. There were warnings. Not enough. There's talk actually there simply wasn't enough warning given, and that people didn't really understand the warnings. These floods have happened before. People have died before, but we've got camps on the side of a river which is known to have flash floods because of basically there's nowhere for the water to go other than to flood. But immediately, as soon as we had reports, again straight away, climate change. These floods have been happening for centuries. People are dying because people are that close to the river. But again, it's an abject failure of flood warning and the authorities preparing people and giving adequate warning. And this is what we've seen with fires, where we've seen flooding in Germany, with fires in California or in Australia. This always ends up being, there have been cuts in the spending on the appropriate way of preventing death from natural disaster. And whenever that happens, the first thing anyone says is, climate change. And it's a lie.
Listen, if you wake up to news about a series of dead 7 to 9-year-old girls and you see it as a chance to advance your own political agenda, your own theories on what is going on, and frankly, in many cases, your own personal business interests, because let's be clear, people in the eco movement have done very, very well out of going on about how great doom is impending. If you see dead girls and you think this is a chance to make a political point, you are sick. You are sick. That is an appalling tragedy. Parents are going to wake up knowing that their daughter that they sent off to have what should have been one of the best months of their lives is never coming back. I want to hear far, far less about anyone's political agenda, and I want to hear far more about just remembering a few girls that lost their lives in the most appalling circumstances.
But again, and we talked about the 7th anniversary, doing what is necessary to prevent it from happening again, which is proper flood warning and proper preparation and people understanding the risks attached. It breaks me. It breaks me that people do that. And I'm not making it. I'm saying people are claiming this, and there's been a massive big row going on in the States now between Democrats and Republicans over this, instead of focusing on how could we have saved those lives. They're still searching, for goodness sake, in the hope that there might be a child who we've seen a few people managing to hold on to trees and clinging to life, that they may be found. I just can't even imagine exactly what those parents are going through. Your thoughts on everything we're talking about, always welcome. 0344 499 1000. Do give us a call. Up next, we'll get your thoughts on wealth tax, on these children's special education needs signed off, basically labelled for life. Do get in touch if you want to have your say. And the time right now is 11:25. This is Talk.
It's basically calling on the government to come forward with a discussion document to look at the issues around benefits received by foreign nationals as distinct from British nationals. We believe that there is a case for looking at restricting those benefits to those who are British nationals rather than foreign nationals. But we want to have a discussion document because we appreciate that there are all sorts of issues that then come into play around that. But we think it's an important area that we should be looking at in terms of controlling the welfare bill.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. 11:28 is the time. Thank you very much indeed for your company. Thank you for your calls as well, coming in thick and fast. 03444 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. Let's talk to Keith now. He's in Huddersfield. And Keith, you want to talk about the idea of a wealth tax.
Good morning, Julie.
Good morning.
Long time it's taken me to get through to you.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
No, you're busy. Regarding Neil Kinnock, regarding his 2%, I think it's absolutely atrocious. This is coming from a gentleman with about 800 that sit in House of Lords that get something like £125 a day tax-free.
Oh, I think it's more. Isn't it about 300 a day? Oh, also, I believe
it could be, yes. My apologies, yes, it is 325.
Also, I believe a massive European Commission pension in the family as well.
Yeah, well, as far as I'm concerned, charity starts at home. They should start on Lords first, and then they should go to Parliament and do the same with them. Tax them more.
Tax them? Why? No. Why should they be taxed more than because it's expenses for the Lords, isn't it? That's the case. But why should they be taxed more than anyone else?
Right, I'll tell you. Because at the moment, this government thinks that the public of this country should all be taxed more, right? So they should live by their own rules.
Well, no, they think that the rich should be taxed more. They think that they're not their people, so they don't get.
No,
but I don't really even have an issue with what MPs are paid. I've got an issue with people in the House of Lords who don't do anything and don't deserve to be there. I know an awful lot of people who are in the House of Lords. It's like, what planet are you in the House of Lords? You don't bring any expertise. What are you there for? You're just a crony of a Prime Minister.
There'll be people in House of Lords that are millionaires.
Yeah.
You know, in some... Right.
But they've already paid tax on that.
What you want. Yeah, I'll bet you what you want. He set the figure at 10 million to make sure that people in Lords don't get stung with it.
I think there are some people in the House of Lords worth more than that. Well, remember, there was a tax. Was it Labour looking at tax once again? It was going to be just below, just above where MPs' wages were. But look, the key thing is, here's the reality, Keith. If you could go after everyone in the House of Lords and everyone in the House of Commons, it wouldn't make a blind bit of difference to the country's coffers, because that is small change compared to what is going out and what we need.
I understand that. Well, I understand. I think your organisation understands it better than what we do, because you're being brought up with it. You research things like that. So that's why I watch Talk Radio.
Oh, well, we are very, 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 very proud to have you. Thank you very much, Keith. No, but I understand why people feel resentful. It's like, because, you're doing all right and we're not, and we're struggling. There is an argument about, MPs and people in the Lords understanding how real, ordinary people, like most people in this country, manage their budgets. Thank you, Keith. Appreciate that. Linda is on the line, and she's in Dorset. And Linda, you want to talk about this idea about reforming special educational needs?
No, it's the ADHD.
ADHD, yep. Well, that's one of the main... Autism and ADHD are two of the biggest areas where we've seen a massive rise in claimants.
Yeah. What happened was, I was sat in the doctor's surgery a few weeks ago next to a young mum with a little girl. The little girl must have been about 4. She was being as good as gold, looking at books. And the mum said to her, right, when we get in there to see the doctor, scream and shout, run about and touch things. And we'll get more money. We can go on holiday. I couldn't believe it.
Oh, I'm so rarely speechless. Oh, my God. And you're sitting there. Did you say anything?
Yeah, I thought, sure, I'll say something. I thought, no, she'll probably get queer with me.
You thought someone who's going to do that isn't someone I necessarily want to mess with. But the kid was fine. As far as you were concerned, the kid was fine.
Yeah, she picked a book off the shelf. She'd probably never seen a book before. And she was mesmerised with this book. good as gold she was, good as gold. Yeah.
Wow, that is, and how tragic is that? Get a label on your kid. Don't bother doing the stuff yourself, but we can get a holiday. But that's the thing. Look, people say, "Oh, that's a one-off." Oh, is that made up? I don't believe it's made up, Linda. But the course says we'll all know people. I've got a mate. He's he's the head teacher of an inner city comprehensive, and he says, "I've got kids at that school. If they are not on their medication, ADHD or severely autistic, who are we're genuinely worried about if they're not." He goes, but the vast majority of them, it's parents. Simple as that.
And I remember when my youngest now, he was about 3 or 4, he was a nightmare. He'd kick, he'd bite, he'd whatever.
Yeah.
And it was in the days where it was all about E-numbers.
Oh, yeah.
So we took him off that, put him on a special diet, good as gold.
What a surprise. Get the kids off the processed food and the fizzy drinks and all of that. Absolutely. Oh, Linda, couldn't agree with you more. That is a jaw-dropping story. Quite literally. Linda, thank you for that. Sam Armstrong, your face when Linda said that.
We all know that it's happening. Literally everybody has seen this happening up close. Everybody in this country seems to recognise that there is a problem with people trying it on, other than...
Adult and parents doing it to their children.
Other than Labour MPs who seem to be determined to hand out money, hand over fist to anybody who walks in and pretends that they have a problem.
And money that we don't have. It's full stop. We don't have. We're borrowing it, which means that future taxpayers are going to be paying for it. And no, they're not all going to be multimillionaires because they will be long gone. 11:34 is the time. We'll take a quick break right now, and then we're going to be talking about senior police officers telling police they should be tackling cannabis because it's actually a crime for people to be smoking and carrying cannabis. What a mind-boggling idea. Police tackling actual crime. But would you support that? This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, 11:37. I bet during that break you were having the same conversation Sam and I were about that mum saying, act up in front of the doctor so we can get those benefits and go on holiday. We've all met those people. We've all sat next to them on the train, haven't we? Oh, yes. And in restaurants, as I once explained in a restaurant to a family, so would you be all right if your child didn't run around screaming, please? They said, have you got a problem with our kid? I'm like, no, I have a problem with you and your terrible parenting. I mean, should we not call this stuff out and tell it straight to people? But I'm sure your kid will have a wonderful statement. It'll be an absolute joy for the teachers to look after. They'd be delighted to get your child's statement in, so they don't have to deal with your kid anymore. Genuinely, we need to deal with this. We simply can't. It's untenable to carry on as we are. Right. I'm wondering if actually part of the problem is the fact that we don't have any discipline, not just in our homes but on our streets anymore, because police don't police anymore, really, do they? What they do is arrest people like my guest coming up at midday for holding a sign expressing his free speech and his views on trans ideology. Instead, though, maybe they should be doing things like policing actual crimes, like, for instance, possession or smoking of cannabis. Top police chiefs say the smell of cannabis is a sign of crime that can make even them feel unsafe. And they say, mind-blowing this, frontline officers should do something about it. I know, I'm as surprised as you are. But the person crucially calling this out is the country's longest-serving Chief Constable, and that's Sir Andy Marsh, who now leads the College of Policing. He's been backed by the Greater Manchester Police Chief, Sir Stephen Watson, and Merseyside Chief Constable Serena Kennedy. Well, let's talk about this with Kevin Hurley. He's a former Detective Chief Superintendent in the Met Police. A very good morning to you, Kevin.
Morning.
Thank you for joining us. I just find it fascinating at the moment that we have headlines about senior police officers telling officers that they should, arrest people for crimes. I mean, it just seems like such an avant-garde idea. I wonder if it will catch on.
Yeah, I mean, it's bizarre. These have been, how can I put it, spoken about poorly. The issue here is that our police on the street, and by that I mean the ones who are in the response roles, through a combination of either being rushed from pillar to post, being distracted from their job by having to sit on hospital guards on mentally disordered people because there's not the mental health care there once was, or because of the fact they're told continually to back off when confronted in different states, particularly with certain ethnic minority communities. We've actually got a workforce that's badly demoralised and badly demotivated. If we combine that with the fact that the impact of Theresa May and Cameron's cuts starting from 2010 has had a catastrophic effect on the retention of experienced officers.
Yeah. I mean, some of it is about money, some of it's about paperwork, some about is the mad ideological stuff, isn't it? But police officers, and I know rank and file officers who Bobby's walking the beat, they feel they've totally got their hands tied behind their back, as you say, spending a lot of time dealing with mental health issues of people, and because social services and everyone don't turn up, and they haven't got time to do the policing. But when you talk about police chiefs saying, look, the smell of cannabis is a sign of crime, because by definition you shouldn't be in possession of cannabis, you shouldn't be smoking cannabis. But we know only a tiny proportion of those caught with it are ever actually charged and ever actually get a conviction. I mean, a tiny percentage, and it has been, to all intents and purposes, almost legalised as long as you're not supplying it, you haven't got a load of you. But it is an indicator, isn't it, that, for example, of criminality.
Of course I mean, it's an indicator, and to all intents and purposes, shoplifting, not paying your fare on buses and tubes and trains has been quasi, legalised. Yeah. And the issue on all of this comes down to where I was going with, because of the impact of what I would call the political attack on the police by Theresa May, cuts in pay, cuts in their training, attacks on the leadership, etc., trying to say, no, you can't do this with this ethnic minority group and so on. Yeah. You've ended up with the level of experience of people patrolling our streets being around about 3 years in the police, which means they are still schoolboys and schoolgirls in terms of their life knowledge.
Haven't got the confidence, haven't got the experience.
Correct. Exactly that. They're scared. So the issues here is that something needs to be done to reverse that and re-empower the police where they feel they're going to do that.
But a lot of this, come in here, because Andy Marsh, who leads the College of Policing, I mean, College of Policing, you could argue, is one of the problems. They were told, stop doing non-crime hate incidents by, Home Secretary after Home Secretary, but carried on doing it. They've been pushing a whole agenda themselves. I mean, they're saying you should spend time dealing with this, but they've been like sending police out to deal with my guest coming up at 11 o'clock. He was just standing there peacefully, with a billboard on. Now, I mean, the reality is that the police, I would say the biggest undermining of police officers on the beat has actually been carried out by College of Policing and chief police officers who are hugely ideological and political now and no longer see their job as rank and file, get on with it, policing.
I agree with you completely. A lot of the doctrine that comes out from the College of Policing is actually behind some of this demoralisation of it. So, there's one case, and you'll remember it, and it's been on here, I think, the past month or so ago in Dorset. Their most active police constable, continually commended, was dismissed after taking down a violent youth in possession of a knife who'd assaulted an old man because he used the F word and called him a bitch. And
language. Apologies for that language. Sorry.
I think bitch is probably okay, but I didn't.
No, don't say it again, please. I apologise to anybody for offended by that language.
The female dog. But anyway, the point I'm making, and this guy afterwards, I don't know if you know, having been dismissed from the police, recently detained another violent shoplifter because he's that way. But
it's in his blood. Yeah.
That lesson has been picked up by every proactive police officer in the country who think far better to not get involved if I want to pay my mortgage.
Yeah, we understand that. But listen, can I bring you back to the subject in hand? In terms of the smell of cannabis, there's been this idea, and it's very much pushed by the sort of the left-wing left. And actually, I'm going to say the libertarian right as well. Like, look, people should be free to do, as long as you're not actually, hurting someone else. What difference does it make if people are doing drugs? But of course, the process by which the drugs, whatever they are, whether it's heroin or whether it's cannabis, but the process by which that drug gets into your hands involves a huge amount of criminality and organised gangs and violence and often exploitation of people who are very, very vulnerable as well in the community, the county line gangs and things like that. But also, I remember living in New York before Rudy Giuliani, and I know there's lots of question marks about whether it did change or not, but certainly the change for me was off the scale when I went back there afterwards in terms of this idea of tackling every small petty crime, the urinating in the street, the jaywalking, you tackle all the little crimes, and actually, the smoking of drugs in public, and actually you get people who've got knives on them who are actually already wanted for a robbery, and actually tackling those low-level crimes. So for me, the people riding the bikes on the pavement and going through red light, tackling all of that stuff actually improves life for the ordinary person much more. But you actually grab an awful lot of largely the young men who are committing all the other crime as well.
Julia, you're talking about the zero tolerance doctrine of Bill Bratton. Yeah. And for what it's worth, so you know where I am, I used to have my own TV programme when I was a police chief called Britcop's Zero Tolerance Policing.
Love it.
And it always started off with me saying, they don't rule the streets, we do.
Yeah, well, so, they do rule the streets now, don't they?
Yeah. The issue on it is, Julia, if you allow incivilities to grow and grow in all their forms, then the yobs, if you like, the louts, think they can do what they like. So if you don't enforce people paying their fares on buses and tubes, you don't enforce people throwing litter on the floor.
Oh, yes.
Throwing their McDonald's wrappers outside that. You don't enforce against abusive and unpleasant language on the street. These kind of things, and indeed cannabis smoking on the street, then people think that you can do what you like. You need to set a tone of what is acceptable. You don't need to put everyone in prison, but what you do need to do is if someone thinks it's okay to throw their McDonald's wrapper in front of you as you walk along the floor, say to them, pick that up, please, and put it in the bin. No. In which case, I'll require your name and address because I'm going to get you summonsed. No. In which case, you will be arrested if you don't give your name and address. No. In which case, I'm going to get another 20 people here and you will be arrested. The point I'm making is we have created a culture where police back off.
Yeah.
So if you go onto an estate where there's disorder caused by yobbery, for want of a better word, the default position of supervisors, leaders, because they should be leaders, but I'll call them supervisors because they think like that as opposed to let's lead, let's inspire. Let's withdraw for community tranquility purposes.
Yeah, and we see that again and again, and then people can ride roughshod. We're going to have to leave it there, but I'm sure the audience are cheering you on there. Kevin Hurley, former Detective Chief Superintendent of the Met Police, thank you so much. Come on again very soon. Sam Armstrong, I mean, this is it, isn't it? It's like, it's dope, you know, it's people smoking cannabis on the streets, it's cigarettes butts, it's the littering, it's the riding through red lights, it's the scooters on the pavement, it's the shoplifting, it's the feet on seats, it's the fare dodging, it's all of that is making life in many of our towns and cities utterly intolerable and is leading people. You can see the way I feel even just talking about it. I'm sort of walk to work and I'm angry by the time I get, because I see so much of this. And lots of people feel that we're living in a lawless country now.
I'm fed up with people being told that it's not OK for them to feel intimidated when they see a group of young men smoking this
young
cannabis.
Women are just as scary now, by the way.
It obviously reeks. It is threatening. It is menacing. And as Kevin said, those streets, those public spaces are ours. They're for all of us to enjoy. And they are not the preserve of the most intimidating, the most law-abusing, the kind of survival of the fittest jungle environment that at times it has become in recent years.
Absolutely. 11:48 is the time. I'm going to take a quick break. We'll get more of your calls. We're also going to be joined by Tim Montgomery, former number 10 advisor to the Conservatives. Now he's with Reform UK. What on earth is going on with Reform UK? How can they never keep 5 MPs at the same time? That's up next. This is Talk.
Most of the Labour MPs voted to prescribe them under the Terrorism Act of 2000. And it goes further, of course, than vandalism, doesn't it, Mike? They sabotage, that's the word I would use, sabotage 2 RAF aircraft to the point of £7 million. But not only did they sabotage them, this is at a time when we're all manner of global conflicts and threats around us. And so to take away the capability from our Royal Air Force, it is an act of terrorism, in my view.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This
This is Talk. Welcome back. It's coming up to 11:52. Sam Armstrong and myself have been joined in the studio now by Tim Montgomery. He's a former number 10 advisor under the Conservatives. He's now a member of Reform UK and joins us. Morning to you.
Morning.
I want to talk to you about why is it that Reform UK seem to be utterly incapable, despite being elected with 5 Reform UK MPs last July, keeping 5 MPs. They lost one and they got another one. And now they've lost one again. We've seen the resignation of the party whip from James McMurdoch as the MP for South Basildon and East Thurrock, removed the party whip from himself amid claims reported in the Sunday Times that he had basically, I think the allegation is that his bounce back loans that were issued during the pandemic amounting to £70,000 for 2 companies he owned were in some way taken under circumstances that were not entirely legal. I think that is all acceptable. I think that is the allegation. I don't want to add to any libels or anything. He has said all his business dealings have been conducted fully within the law and in compliance with all regulation. But as a precautionary measure for the protection of the Reform UK party, he's asked for the whip to be suspended. What is going on?
Well, look, I don't want to particularly cover the individual allegations because I don't know the truth of them. They need to be investigated speedily and by proper process. But what obviously is an issue is that this, as you've suggested, keeps happening to Reform. And Nigel Farage, if we were operating under a presidential or a mayoral system, I'd be incredibly confident that Reform could win the next general election. Nigel Farage is one of the most impressive, formidable personalities in British politics of the last quarter of a century. But of course, Julia, we don't operate under that system. We operate under a parliamentary system. And the biggest challenge for Reform is to find 300 to 350 parliamentary candidates who stand up to scrutiny. Now, what happened with James McMurdoch was he won in a seat the Reform didn't expect to win at the last
And then
election.
it was discovered that he had a history, we had a conviction involving domestic abuse.
And he hadn't gone through the kind of vetting procedure that is now in place.
That's kind of quite basic, isn't it? Do you
well,
have a
it's
criminal
now in
conviction
place,
of any sort?
now in place, not just for parliamentary candidates Reform, it was in place for the selection of our council candidates in the last sort of local elections round. And why we are investing as a party so much in local elections, in next year's Welsh and Scottish elections, is because it's from this group of people that we hope to test people, understand people, get to know people, so that we can actually put forward a number of candidates to the British people the next election that we know are not going to sort of represent, in all likelihood, James McMurdoch type problems.
Not just going to be a a Reform MP, a local MP, but possibly going into government. If the polls are right, you could be either in a majority or some sort of a coalition with the Conservatives or whoever. I know you're all saying you won't, but let's face it, if the numbers stacked up the way they may well stack up... That would be for the
British people to decide.
That would be, all of that. But at the end of the day, some of you are going to have to go into government. Now, is it that Reform UK struggles more than any other party to get quality candidates? Yeah. Are you under more scrutiny than other parties so you can have some absolutely useless backbench Tory or Labour or Lib Dem MP that no one's noticed, so no one's looking into, whereas we've got a load of organisations that spend all day, every day, trying to find everything and anything that anyone in Reform has ever said?
I think it's a bit of both, probably. And I think you introduced me as a former Conservative. I remember being sat in this studio, not least with you on occasions, defending the latest scandal that had encountered the last Tory government. Labour, we all know they're facing a number of scandals.
We had Damien Green on earlier, as former Deputy Prime Minister, called watching porn in his office, for goodness sake.
And had to resign from his position, or was sacked by Theresa May for, so all parties have trouble. I think because Reform is such a young party, it's only been in existence a relatively short period of time, we haven't had in place the kind of procedures that I've just described that are now in place to guard against this kind of incident.
How parties do guard against this. I mean, we've seen this, again, I think, with all political parties. I've been a political journalist for many years, watching scandal after scandal. But it does seem to me, one of the things I've always felt very strongly about, people who took help during the pandemic. I've always thought that Rishi Sunak, when he was Chancellor at the time, when he announced we're going to give help, we're going to give their bounce back loans, we're going to be giving furlough, I think there should be an announcement at the time and a law change. God, they were throwing through any law they wanted at the time. Anyone caught taking money they don't need under any fraudulent basis faces 10 years behind bars. Nothing to discuss. Not 5 years, not 10 years, and you will serve the full 10 years. Because I thought that, there was so much money. We are in the financial straits we're in right now because of all that money. But if it was for companies, if it was businesses that needed it, there is a big question mark. I mean, again, It may have been legal, what he did. It may have been, as he said, in compliance with all regulations. But we're talking about a 50 grand loan is alleged to have received one business with an annual... which basically, didn't appear to have any employees and negligible assets until the pandemic, and a company that was dormant, 70 grand in total. There are big question marks about this, but he wasn't the only one. If he did do this, he wasn't the only one, and that money was thrown around, wasn't it? Do you think, though, that this is indicative of the problems that your party, your new party now, is going to have, is that actually you're going to struggle to find enough people who are going to be whiter than white, who are going to pass muster?
I think it's going to be a challenge. I think it's the number one challenge that the party faces, to select these candidates. But, Julia, we won over 850 council seats this year. Those council candidates are already under enormous scrutiny.
We've already had one resign.
2 or 3 have resigned, mainly through ill health rather than anything sort of untoward. But the candidate process that we are now operating, you don't have to wait till the next general election. It's already in operation. So journalists such as yourself at Talk and in other organisations can examine the people we are selecting. So there is
you understand the frustration feel, though. Oh God, there's another potential scandal again. He's denied any wrongdoing. We need to stress that.
I can more than understand it.
It can't be more than just Nigel Farage as a one-man band.
I feel it myself. I was there coming up on Saturday to do a Times Radio interview, downstairs, and I thought, my goodness, I'm going to have to defend this now. Yeah. It's a perennial problem. Yeah, I feel it as well, and I can't stress enough how much of the limited resources Reform have are going into solving this problem. We know that the British people will expect us to have a slate of candidates that stand up to scrutiny, and they deserve it, and we make sure we will.
Sam Armstrong's still with us. Now, you're a Conservative. Are Reform, though, under more scrutiny? Because, my God, there are an awful lot of people, I've got question marks raised about the Tories, the Labour. You've got a load of MPs no one notices.
The sad truth is, no, it's 40% of Reform's MPs have gone wrong. And I do take issue with what Tim here says, which is that, we need to get candidates that stand up to scrutiny. Nigel Farage recognises that this country's in dire straits and he wants to completely reset the British state. It's a huge job, will require 120 ministers that don't just stand up to scrutiny, but are actually seriously good, capable people
offence,
as well.
But your lot had loads of experience and had all those candidates vetted, and you did a shockingly bad job, as indeed of the current lot. I mean, that would be the argument I'd make. Tim Montgomery, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for coming into the studio from Reform UK member now. More from Sam Armstrong. Up next, very similar name, Montgomery Toms is going to be here. He got arrested at the weekend, but what did he actually do that deserved arrest? We'll find out. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. If you're just tuning in, great to have your company, whether you're listening on DAB Plus Radio, whether you are listening on the smart speaker or watching on YouTube or your connected device. Thank you so much for joining us. An awful lot of you getting in touch on the phone lines as well, particularly about the wealth tax that we've been talking about, particularly also about special educational needs and a huge increase, as we've seen with adult disability benefits, in that extra spending, £12 billion a year. Is the government going to, quote, reform that or not? Well, we know an awful lot of the trade unions and indeed many Labour backbench MPs are just saying, look, don't reform any benefits, give more benefits to everybody, whether it's adult or children, and let's just fund it all with a wealth tax, because that's the answer. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000, text on 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. Coming up in just a couple of moments, we are going to be chatting to Montgomery Toms, a campaigner and activist who was arrested in London this weekend. We'll find out why in just a moment. We're also going to be talking about how a study has revealed that terrorists inside British prisons are teaching organised crime gangs how to make bombs. And in return for that, extremist inmates are learning from gang members how to launder money, how to use the dark web and get weapons that can be used in a terror attack. The study comes amid concerns over the rise of Islamist gangs following attacks on prison officers in jails. Comes, of course, also on the day of the 20th anniversary of the 7/7 attacks that left 52 people dead in London on tubes and buses, and, of course, 800 or more injured, many life-changing injuries. Plus, we're going to be talking more about Palestine Action. The newly proscribed terror organisation is said to have created a secret website to recruit activists in an attempt to thwart the government ban. This after some 29 arrests at the weekend after basically a sit-in involving, well, pretty much all the usual suspects, lawyers, university lecturers, you know the type, saying they supported Palestine Action, which is now a criminal offence. Plus, we're going to be talking about the horrible, horrible events in Texas. The death toll from flooding in Texas has reached 80. It's predicted now it could top 100, including 28 children, amid fears it would rise further. As I say, President Trump called it an unimaginable tragedy, and the US President has declared a major disaster as rescuers trying to find at least 10 missing girls from Camp Mystic, the Christian camp overwhelmed when the River Guadalupe burst its banks on Friday. But why is there such a political battle going on in the States over whether or not this was caused by climate change or not? Brackets. It wasn't. Close brackets. Do get in touch. Give us a call, 0344 499 on anything you 1000. Sorry, anything you want to talk about. And also, don't forget, if you miss anything on the show, if you've just tuned in, you've missed a stonking show so far, mainly because of my guests, not me, but do take a look at the Julia Hartley-Brewer show YouTube page, and if you subscribe, you will never miss a thing. Right now, let me introduce you once again to Sam Armstrong, who's a Conservative commentator who is joining us in the studio. You also do a lot of work with Free Speech Union, so I know our next guest will very much interest you. His name is Montgomery Toms, and he is a freedom campaigner. He joins us in the studio. Very good afternoon to you. Montgomery, I was very interested to see over the weekend that you decided to go along to the Pride in London march. I don't know why there's another Pride in London march. I thought Pride was last month, but apparently it does go on all year. Sadiq Khan was tweeting about it. Doesn't allow replies, of course. But you decided to offer what you called a counter perspective. Tell us what you did.
So ultimately, I went to the Pride March, and I went there with a sandwich board which stated...
A big billboard, yeah.
Yeah. And it stated, you know, there's the trans flag, which is significant, equals mental illness. Now, once upon a time, to be identifying as another gender was actually categorised as a mental illness. That's since been changed, but that was kind of World Health Organization.
It is still treated as a mental health problem. I mean, that's why children who believe that they are born in the wrong body are being sent to psychologists. It is body dysphoria. It is a form. So, for instance, someone who thinks that I should have a third leg or only be born with one leg, 100%. And there are people who think that they are diagnosed with a mental health illness, body dysphoria. And one could argue that someone who believes that, well, I should have been born, I'm a man, but I should have been born with a woman's body, or a woman who thinks I should have been born with a man's body, doesn't match my brain. It is a form of body dysphoria.
Absolutely, but I think the principle around this is less about what the sign says but more that I should have the ability to say that.
Now, this is it. You were not harassing people who were joining the Pride March. You were just simply standing.
So I arrived. I was there for about half an hour. I interacted with a couple of people, pretty amicable. Obviously,
your choice, or did they approach you?
They approached me, and then an officer came over and demanded that I remove the sign.
Now, the sign. Let me clarify that lots of people fly the Pride flag. Now, it used to be the rainbow flag, and then it became the very complicated one that pushes trans ideology and Black Lives Matter and everything else. And it's the very big, the one with the black and the brown
this is
arrows.
One with the pink.
This is the pink turquoise, or pink, pale blue and white flag. This is specifically the one representing trans. Now, I think one thing you and I both share is that I believe that trans is an ideology. I don't believe it's a real thing. Someone is gay or not gay.
Yeah,
but
no, absolutely.
People who you either are or you are not sexually attracted to people of the same sex or the opposite sex. Whereas someone who believes that they are born in the wrong body, well, I think it's a simple matter of fact. They are not born in the wrong body. No one is born in the wrong body. Your body is your body. If you identify and want to live as if you are the opposite gender, fill your boots, but you're not the opposite gender. We've recently had that established by the Supreme Court.
So.
Biological sex is a reality. It is based on the actual what a woman is, what a man is. You wanted to make your statement. Were you trying to harass people? Were you trying to anger people? Were you trying to provoke people?
Well, that's what the police asked me, of course. And on principle, I just think that we should have, even on kind of a grassroots level, a reaction to something which I don't believe to be true, and also very harmful towards children specifically. There's loads of kids there, which shocks me. This is being promoted to them, this woke ideology that it's acceptable.
It's in schools on a day-to-day basis.
It's beyond in schools. It's just insane what they are doing. But when the police demanded for me to take it off, I refused. And I did that on the principle is I have freedom of speech and I have the right to demonstrate.
And a lot of this is on video.
Yeah.
In the end, extraordinarily, watching the videos and reposted them at the weekend, 11 police officers.
Well, it's worse than that because I actually walked away. So the initial officer that came to speak to me told me to take it off. I then refused, but I was sensitive to the fact that I didn't want to be overly antagonistic and end up in a jail cell. So I decided to walk away, and all of a sudden I was 2 streets away from the demonstration, and 9 cops arrived, plus 2 more a bit later. I was handcuffed.
They followed you?
Essentially, and came
so their
the
issue was presumably that you were making this statement on the sandwich board.
They thought my words were harmful.
But you'd walked away from the Pride March.
I'd walked away, and then they followed me, and then they handcuffed me. And their reason for doing that is, well, they don't really have a proper reason.
You were asking, you were stating repeatedly that you had the right to exercise your freedom of speech.
And they think it's public.
Very calmly, by the way, very calmly.
Well, it's important that we do, and they think it's public disorder, etc. But define that. I mean, clarify that to me in detail. How is what I've done going to harm anybody? And it seems to me, and they obviously didn't want to say this, that they're less concerned about me and more concerned about the individuals reacting to what I have to say. And I make the point really clear. Since when did we govern our country on emotion? We're supposed to govern on law.
Well, weirdly, it's very similar to, say, groups organising with anti-Hamas posters at the supposedly pro-Palestinian marches we've had for the last year and a half every fortnight in London, that they've been told that, no, you're provoking, you could provoke disorder because someone in the march might not agree with what you have to say, when actually the problem should, if someone is provoked by seeing a placard or a sign, they are the problem, not the person holding the sign. But you kept pointing out to the police, and they were very quiet. They were barely speaking, weren't they? Clearly just, we've been told to come and arrest you. You're the problem at this point. That you had a legal right. Now, not just the Supreme Court, but Maya Forstadt, her case at the Supreme Court about the right to people, it is a protected, absurdly protected as a belief, even though it's reality. It's a belief, a protected belief that you can believe that, trans women are not women, etc. But do you think that some people might say, who agree with you and are concerned about trans ideology, that holding a sign up or wearing a sign that says trans equals mental illness, some people could say that is provocative and that is offensive? What would you say to that?
Yeah, well, obviously I was asked that, and that was the motivation for the arrest. I mean, look, my response to that was, if the shoe was on the other foot, they wouldn't treat them the same way. And that's
if you said, I'm offended by someone saying, trans is real, children should be
and to which a lot of us have been attacked, maybe not physically, but verbally and emotionally for a long time now, just for saying that there's 2 genders. Yet, you know, obviously we don't get protected in any sense, and we're supposed to put up with that. So this is subjective policing. You can't, as I say, you can't police based off words and offending people. That's utterly ridiculous. We're seeing this constant attack of free speech online, all of these things. So my response to that would be, we have to maintain the right to use words freely, because it's a very slippery slope. I would say we're already almost down the end of that slope of the complete attack and removal of freedom of speech, freedom of expression. It's mental. It's against our constitution. It's against law
fundamental principles. Well, look, you eventually ended up with 11 police officers surrounding you. You were standing, it's all on video, standing very, very calm and still, not being abusive, not just saying, I've got a right to do this. What happened then?
Well, once I was arrested, I was taken to Charing Cross police station, and I was held. I mean, in total, from the arrest to the end I was there, you know, the whole process was about 10 to 11 hours by the time I'd sort of got out of the situation. But I was in a cell for about 9 to 10 hours. And in that process, obviously, I was interviewed and so forth. The interview was very interesting.
I was going to say, what did they ask you?
It was quite fun. I mean, honestly,
Were you scared at any point?
No, because I know fear. I'm more scared of having a country where we can't have this.
Losing the ability to do
so
this is more scary. Okay, so what did they ask you?
I was asked in the interview, you know, about my intent, which is the most important thing, and they were very fascinated, and this will bring me on to my next kind of crucial point about what I do for work. They were quite focused on this, and I tried to explain, well, I do kind of a lot of campaigning and so forth. I'm very pro-free speech. And once they identified that a lot of my work revolves around Westminster, I have now been released on a pre-charge, but with bail condition to say I'm banned from the city of Westminster. I cannot enter. And if
you can't do your job,
can't do my job, essentially. So this is going to be challenged, and I assume
what was the actual charge?
So I've not. It's called a pre-charge. So
they haven't told you?
No.
Did you kept asking presumably, why am I here?
So they've not been able to clarify.
What crime do you think I've committed?
Public disorder was
But you weren't committed. I mean, you were standing quietly by the side of the street.
I know. I don't know what to tell you.
But we have this, haven't we? We've had, you know, a Christian campaigner outside not even outside, but near an abortion clinic, praying silently in her head, who's been arrested again and again. And yet, it's exactly thought crime. And yet, again and again, we see people marauding around central London, you know, intimidating people, say these pro-Palestinian marches. A lot of people, again, may disagree with some of the ideology that is on display at the Pride March. Again, love a bit of pride, absolutely, you know, fill your boots. But I've never understood why trans has got anything to do with gay, but an awful lot of gay and lesbian and bisexual people absolutely don't want to have anything to do with that.
That was the significance of it being a trans flag. And interestingly, the police wanted to confuse that and accuse me of obviously going for the whole shebang of LGB, but I wasn't.
But again, I would still defend your right, even though I would disagree with you, I would defend your right to have those views about gay people.
Totally agree. And
in the same way a gay person could have that view about me as a straight person.
Yeah, but it's just, I'm using it as an example of how the police hijack and have a political agenda to enforce, though it still lives within the Met Police even after the court hearing. It
lives in the government. Look, Parliament hasn't even dealt with a lot of this. Did you suspect that the motivation was one individual zealot police officer who started it all? Did you get the impression that they'd been ordered, like there'd been like a load of people on the radio going, get that guy over there? What was your impression of what you thought was going on?
Well, ultimately, I had this initial conversation with an officer who told me I had to remove the sign, and once I told him I'm not going to be doing that, you know, I knew that was going to escalate, and he would have been in contact with his superior. So there's somebody out there who essentially gave the order to send in 9 officers plus a few more to come and arrest me, to which they'll be cringing right now, because that video alone of the initial arrest has got over 1 million views. I've got huge backing in terms of fighting this, and we're going to win. I mean, this is absolutely
Well, if you
ludicrous.
don't, then this country truly is lost.
Yeah.
But it is absolutely fascinating. Your views, when you work with the Together Declaration campaign, we have Alan Miller's big friend of the show, fan of his. I've spoken at their events previously. You're part of your motivation is you're a Christian, but that's not, you're not working with a Christian group. But either way, it is fascinating when we have seen demonstrations, often sometimes quite intimidating demonstrations, by people of other more minority faiths. we don't see any action, even though people are being physically intimidated, whether it's outside a school, Batley Grammar School, whether it's outside cinemas about a film that someone doesn't like, whether we've seen the extraordinary situation of a man now, criminalised for burning a Quran. It does seem that some religions get a free pass, and Christianity definitely doesn't.
No, and I actually
in a Christian country.
I made that clear. I think in somewhere there's lots of footage out there. You'll be able to find it where I turn around and say, you don't like Christians, do you? But what if I was Muslim? How would you react?
Well,
then?
they'll probably think that's a hate crime too. But it's a legitimate question.
It is.
You've got lawyers.
Yep.
You're going to be able to fight this. I know. As soon as you came to the studio, Sam Armstrong, you do a lot of work for the Free Speech Union. You campaign on these issues. What action is open to Montgomery to take now against the police?
Well, Montgomery's case follows, I think, a pattern, which is this abuse of public order legislation. We've seen it used to clamp down on a man who burnt the Quran. We've seen it in a number of other cases. Now, the offence that Montgomery was arrested for says what the sign he was displaying had to have been threatening or abusive. Plainly, it wasn't.
Yeah.
So, potentially...
I think most people would regard it as a statement of fact.
Potentially, it's open to him to sue for wrongful arrest, for the bail conditions are plainly excessive, and I very much doubt that the CPS will charge Montgomery in this case, and he'll have the recourse
if
to come back.
If they've got any sense. But what about the fact that he was detained for 10 hours?
Well, indeed, wrongful imprisonment. But this is the issue. The person that picks up the bill when Montgomery's rights are avowed, he avows himself as his rights and sues the police, as I hope he does, are the taxpayer.
Yep.
No individual officer will be disciplined. No individual officer will be sacked. The senior officer, presumably, who signed this off, will not be removed from office immediately, as well they should be. And we have seen this time and time again. We saw the case of a gentleman down in Kent, a former special constable, for posts on social media. Yep. Officers came to his house, said, "Oh, you've got Douglas Murray books on your shelves."
Bit Brexity.
Bit Brexity. What happened to those officers? Absolutely nothing. They're still going out. They're still enforcing the laws, and they do so very, very badly, in part because police officers in this country are not trained on freedom of speech. They're given days and days of training on diversity, almost none on freedom of speech. And what we see is that we, the taxpayer, are actually the ones that are getting left on the hook.
Yeah, and again, and this is the key thing, isn't it, Montgomery? Because people, again and again, I think he makes such a good point there, that these things keep on happening. And yes, there may well be, after a lengthy period of time, Alison Pearson at the Telegraph or other people, they win their case or they don't get charged, and then you've got a case, you've got a civil suit, and absolutely people must pursue those to make that message. But nothing seems to change. Mm-hmm. What do you want to change?
I want this case, but not just my case, all the cases to be kind of brought to public attention, into the mainstream. You'll see if the BBC does something like that. I highly doubt it. But ultimately, we need to be pushing back on all levels, like a scattergun approach. We need to be doing this on a grassroots level, much like I did yesterday, of saying I want to put a different opinion forward and soaking up the consequences, because you will have consequences. But ultimately, what choice do we have? We have to fight for freedom of speech in this country. If we lose the right to speak freely and lose the right to have debate, then that's it. It's over. It's 1984 in 2025. And this is what we're seeing rapidly. So we need to be pushing back on all levels, whether that be contacting your MP, whether it be on the ground kind of grassroots work, whether that's talking to your neighbour. This needs to be a conversation we're relentlessly having, because we need debate, we need freedom of speech, and we need to push back on this political agenda to take away our freedom, strip us of, honestly, democracy, because that's what democracy is supposed to thrive on.
People don't seem to know, it is the bedrock, it is the foundation stone. If you don't have freedom of speech, you can't criticise and you can't question, especially an ideology that's sprung up out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. And is dominating, and I totally agree with you in terms of the damage to our children from this ideology. And indeed, so does this government and the last government, because we had that review into the Tavistock clinic, and they decided, to close down those routes because...
I said that to the police.
Exactly because of this. So it's official government policy. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting, some people are saying, look, the NHS treats this as a mental health issue, as opposed to a mental illness. I think most of us regard those things as same thing.
You really are clutching at straws there, aren't you, if you start to use that as a reason to arrest somebody based on the use of words.
Yeah, but again, even if someone's offended by it, so what?
Absolutely agree.
Turn away.
Absolutely agree. It's just pushing that point and reiterating the fact that we need freedom of speech and we need debate in this country. It's not even a complicated point we're making.
You know what? I wish your case was sort of a complete one-off and everyone was talking about it, but it's not a one-off. It's happening all the time. All credit to you for, you know, putting your principles and your values on the line. More young people like this, please, she said, like she was a 70-year-old judge. But this is true. We need more of this, more people standing up. Any help I can give you, any help I know Free Speech Union can give you, I'm very sure will be there. And keep us posted. Come back again and let us know what's happened. Montgomery Times Freedom Campaign. Now, that is exactly what you are. We don't have to agree or disagree with what he did or what is said on the placard. It's a question of whether you're allowed to exercise your views. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Lots more calls coming in about wealth tax and indeed ADHD claims and special educational needs claims. Love to hear your thoughts on that as well. Do keep in touch. This is Talk. It normally takes a government a few years to have a few scandals, but it only took a matter of weeks for this government to manage them.
Barely 6 weeks into Keir Starmer's time as Prime Minister, the first big scandal erupted. Lord Ali, a Labour donor very close to Keir Starmer, he lent him his flat, for example. He had been supplying clothes for Keir Starmer and his wife Victoria, and even glasses as well.
First of all, it's like, who bought your bins there, Sir Keir? Is that your little mate in charge of ASOS who's in and out of number 10 and he doesn't actually have a job? Oh, giving you his apartment as well, has he?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, a very, very, very interesting conversation there. If you just missed out the conversation with Montgomery Toms, who was arrested at the weekend, held in a prison cell for some 10 hours in total, simply for wearing a billboard saying, you know, he believes that trans is mental illness. A view he's entirely entitled to hold in a free country. 11 police officers involved. Those 11 police officers, by the way, were not arresting people for shoplifting. They were not arresting those people riding bikes at 30 miles per hour or scooters on the pavements or wrong way down roads. They weren't arresting anyone for littering or urinating in the street or cannabis smoking. No, they weren't arresting anyone for any of that. They were just standing around while a bloke exercised his legal right to free speech in this country. Good on him for standing up for that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. 0344 499 1000. If you missed that interview, do take a look at my YouTube page, Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit subscribe and you can take a look. Right now, let's get to your calls coming in thick and fast, particularly about the wealth tax and this rise in ADHD and autism claims and special educational needs. And we're looking at a ballooning cost, £12 billion it's now ballooning up to. But should it be reformed? That's what the government's hinting at. Let's go talk to Vicky, who's in Norwich. Hello, Vicky.
Hi, you right?
Hello. Very well. What do you want to say, my love?
I 100% agree. It's down to parenting with ADHD. I'm sure some people do have real issues.
But it's a minority.
Really winds me up. Letting your child up until 2 in the morning because you're a gentle parent. It's like a fashionable thing that they boast about. I'd be embarrassed.
So would I. No. Liberal parenting is the worst. It's the worst, and it's really bad for kids. But then people think you're talking about sort of beating your kid or anything like that. It's just, I think kids are terrified when they think that they're in charge. I think kids want to know that the parents are in the room and are in charge.
Yeah, I know. I do. We have someone in the family with 2 young children. Both apparently got ADHD.
Of course they do.
Up in the middle of the night, and they've got bags under their eyes. And I just think, seriously, stop.
No, it's all right. Give them a computer game and another fizzy drink and a bit more food. That'll keep them quiet.
It's crazy. It really, really bugs me, and I don't want to be paying for other people's incompetence.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's bad enough, isn't it, when you've got disability and sickness benefits and people. I mean, I think some of these people, get the adults, they maybe think that they have a level of anxiety, depression where they can't work, but actually they're making their lives worse and we're all paying for it. But when parents do that to their children, but isn't the issue also that we don't? I know how people talk about we don't judge people enough. We actually say, no, I'm sorry, that doesn't work. Here's what does work. You should do this. This works. Bedtime, routines, healthy meals. Your kids need to be, they need to be exercised, especially boys. That's why we've got, more ADHD boys. They need to be out, run around like dogs, for goodness sake. Everyone knows that who's paying attention.
It's crazy, and it's become a societal thing where it's not even a shame. I'd be so ashamed.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh yeah, they've got ADHD. That's why they No,
you're not doing your job properly. Yeah. And again, I'm sure you'll agree with me and all of our guests today. What we really want to do is to make sure that the children who really do have those issues get the help they need, and we need to target it at them. So we can't have every Tom, Dick and Harry signing up to this. Vicky, thank you for your call. Appreciate that. Everybody, hold on to your hats. It's Georgina in London. She's on the line. Georgina, good afternoon. What do you want to talk about?
Good afternoon, my darling, and good afternoon to Sam if he's still there. I don't know whether he is.
You got the loveliest smile from him just then for that.
Oh, bless his heart. Well, I want to get this out of my system before I actually have a stroke, because I'm at that age now. It's about the tax rate, Julia. It doesn't surprise me in the slightest that the government keep coming back to raid the public purse. As you know, we've got a chancellor who's ill-qualified to balance the books and bursts into tears when the going gets tough. So much for the Iron Chancellor. We have put our country and finances in the hands of a government that prioritises the well-being of illegal migrants and ridiculous net zero and DEI ideologies instead of concentrating on the economic growth and safety of the shores of this country. I've said it all along that having a Labour government is like putting a loaded gun in the hands of a child. We will feel
with ADHD.
Well, I've got a son who has autism, and let me tell you, structure, routine, exercise work wonders. We'll feel the full force of tax rises in the autumn, as well as that they're going to hit the pensions too, Julia, as they are desperate to raise money for the ever-increasing welfare bill and illegal migration, breaking the backbone of our Britain. This socialist government keeps promising change that it cannot fund without them having to keep doing an impression of Oliver. Please, sir, can I have some more? To the hard-working taxpayers of this country, the whole of the problem can be eliminated by cutting immediately funding to immigration, DEI, net zero, and foreign aid, so as we can start to help our country back up off its knees.
That's Georgina's solution. Georgina, I'm going to have to cut you off because we're going to finish on air at 1. Georgina, it's always a pleasure. She's the sanest woman on the planet. I'd put her in the Treasury. She wouldn't be blubbing everywhere either. Georgina, thank you. Sam Armstrong wants to come back.
Of course, she certainly had her Weetabix this morning.
Every morning.
Georgina, breathe.
Every
breathe.
morning.
You're right, but breathe.
No, don't. Never change, Georgina. Right now, you'll have heard, actually, the first show over the weekend, but the reunion of the century has already happened. We are giving you a chance to win a pair of Oasis tickets. This time it's in Manchester on July the 19th. That's coming up very soon. You heard that right. Oasis Live 25 is sold out, but talk can get you in. That's not all, though. Alongside the tickets, we're going to put you up for a night in a hotel, and we're going to put $5,000 in your pocket, completely tax-free. Listen up right now to everything you need to know and how to enter.
On iArcade, you have to be over 18 to enter in the UK, excluding Northern Ireland, for the chance to win a pair of tickets to the most electrifying rock and roll reunion of the century, a hotel stay and $5,000 spending money. Text the word WIN to 83338 by Monday the 7th of July at 11 p.m. and you'll be entered into the draw to go supersonic this summer. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You must have the bill payer's permission or post your name and number to Oasis Prize Draw, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP. To arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of July. This is a TalkSport limited promotion run on TalkSport, Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full T's and C's at talksport.com. Good luck, yeah? Sorted.
Well, good luck with that. Right, we're going to take a very quick break and then we're going to be back with Jonathan Hall, KC. He's the independent reviewer of terrorism legislation. Going to talk to him about that 20th anniversary of 7/7 and what on earth is going on in our prisons and with Palestine action. That's all coming up. Stay tuned. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. 12:35 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and let's talk right now to our next guest, Jonathan Hall, KC, is the independent reviewer of terrorism legislation since 2019. Since 2019. In 2019, I do apologise. Jonathan Hall joins us now. A very, very good afternoon to you.
And to you.
Let's talk about, first of all, the 20th anniversary of 7/7, the extraordinary attack on tubes and buses in central London 20 years ago today. Absolutely devastating impact. 52 people died, more than 800 injured, many with life-changing injuries. We've got a memorial service going on right now in St Paul's Cathedral, attended by the great and the good, and we should always remember those who lost their lives in incredible heroism at the time. But in terms of focusing on, well, preventing any future attacks, even we've had an awful lot since, although that is the deadliest on British soil. Have we got the right legislation in place to do that?
I think more or less, although we're struggling a bit with the internet. I mean, I think the internet it's not just a legislation challenge. It's how you deal with tech platforms that are willing to host really, really violent terrorist material that are based elsewhere. It's not going to be solved by legislation. But broadly speaking, we have. I mean, I think the thing that people say is we've got this Terrorism Act. It's what they call threat neutral, which means it can adapt and deal with the changing sorts of terrorism. And broadly speaking, I think we have. But then something will come along like Islamic State, which no one had really predicted. And suddenly we had to look again at, how do you stop people travelling out to commit acts abroad? How do you stop them taking their children out? So I think broadly speaking, yes, but of course it's not perfect at all.
Well, Lisa, how big is the threat these days? Because we've had terror attack after terror attack. I mean, I remember 2017, that spate of terror attacks in June, Manchester Arena and others, London Bridge and Westminster. Very, very, very scary time. This is when just before the general election, when Theresa May was still in power. And it seems to be that the terror attacks sort of move on, and the legislation is constantly trying to catch up with the last crime that was committed. Are we constantly in a catch-up situation, and are we on top of the threat as it actually exists? Because we saw with Axel Rudikabana, the fact that he didn't fit into a particular category and to prevent. Was he Islamist? Was he having different sort of ideology? And somehow people slip through the net.
Yeah, look, I think you put your finger on something there. It's not. I mean, what Rudikabana did was not terrorism, but I'm afraid it's very inspiring to some people. And
there was a case only a week ago, wasn't there, of a young man
exactly.
following
and
suit.
I'm worried. Yeah, I'm worried that when the police go through the door and they find someone with some elaborate plot to carry out a school massacre or go and kill children in the nursery, what can they actually do there? If they're a terrorist, yep, you can bang them up. They can be held and detained for up to life. But at the moment, there's a bit of a gap where you're not a terrorist. So I'm a bit worried about that. I think that's what everyone's really worrying about. It's the latest iteration. I mean, 2005, remember, that was the Al-Qaeda heyday, where you had these plots, maybe coordinated, having gone to a training camp, and they were going for some big spectacular. Then we had the whole ISIS phenomenon. Now it's very much lone actors, which are very difficult to detect and to stop.
And that's the real difficulty, isn't it? And we've seen again and again, though, when there have been lone actors who have been stopped, they've often been flagged to the authorities. Often, there've been concerns, but often we see that people go on to watch lists and then are, not removed from it, but we simply don't have the resources to, watch 40,000 people every single day, 24 hours a day. And yet it seems again and again, it is the people who are judged, could be a risk, not sure, don't have the resources, nothing's going on, we won't bother with this person. That's when we end up seeing a terror attack. Is this a failure of the legislation, the resources, the strategy, or is this just what we're supposed to just live with now?
I'm going to say something a bit bleak, but I think this is just what you have to live with. I mean, it's definitely a failure. Whenever a terrorist like Mohammed Sadiq Khan, so he's the man who led the 7/7 plot. I mean, that was a failure because he was known about by the authorities and he was under surveillance on the edges of a different plot. But I mean, I don't know if this is just a contradiction in terms, but it was a reasonable failure because the resources just aren't there to follow everyone. We wouldn't necessarily want to have spies on every corner. So it's a horrible thing to say, but it's impossible to stop everything, and we will. And
it is, and we understand that at least 40 plots of a sizable plots, not lone wolves, have been stopped by the authorities since 2005. So there are successes. We tend not to hear about them.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you've got to add alongside that, which is another sort of worrying thing, a new bit on the mix, is the Iran-based attack plots. So these are assassination plots, effectively, where Iran is trying to recruit people to carry out murders. And I mean, a huge number. I think Ken McCullum, who's the Director General of MI5, talked about 20 plots disrupted since 2020. I mean, that's a large number of things that the security services are having to look at to throw into the mix.
Yeah, indeed. And again, the resources are absolutely huge. I mean, there's an interesting story today about terrorists inside British prisons teaching organised criminals how to make bombs. And in return for this, extremist inmates are learning from gang members how to launder money, how to use the dark web, how to obtain weapons that can be used in terror attacks. And we've seen a rise of Islamists being put behind bars, and they're often able to mix freely with should we say, ordinary criminals, non-ideological criminals, and we've seen attacks on prison officers in jail as well. You know, boiling oil and water, knife attacks. And there is a real concern that there is some stuff going on behind bars where surely we should think these people we're safe from them, but they're actually not only converting a lot of people to their cause, particularly vulnerable prisoners, but also that exchange of crucial information between organised criminal gangs and Islamist gangs.
Yeah, I don't know if you know this, Julia, but I'm doing the report at the moment for the Lord Chancellor on what's to do about the separation centres. So this is after the Hashim Abedi attack. So, I mean, I can absolutely vouch that there's an internal dynamic that can increase the risk. And, I mean, I looked at Dr. Hannah Bennett's PhD. I think what she was saying was not so much that there's lots of instances of that happening, but that it could happen. And this is an interesting phenomenon about the community as well. So for many years, people have talked about this crime terror nexus. And I have to say, I don't really understand it myself. Why is it that the criminals who've got access to the firearms are not giving those to the terrorists so they can carry out the attacks? And if you think about France and Germany and Belgium, Russia, where firearms are much more freely available, terrorist attacks tend to be, I mean, we've suffered terribly.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, but even worse in places like France and Paris. Yeah. They've suffered enormously. Now, I can't explain why that hasn't happened.
Even in France. But I mean, we saw the Bataclan, they had weapons of Bataclan, but most of the attacks we've seen, even in mainland Europe, have been, you know, sort of again, with a car, with a lorry, crashing into people at a Christmas market, or someone with a huge big knife stabbing people, going on a rampage, not with a weapon that's hard to get hold of, like a semi-automatic rifle.
Well, I think those big attacks in 2015-16. I mean, of course, you're right. There are attacks, the famous Nice attack with a lorry, but there have been significant number of firearms attacks and explosives attacks.
Right.
We haven't suffered from that so much in the UK, and I can't quite explain why that nexus hasn't operated in the community. I mean, Dr. Bennett is obviously right to say it could happen, but I also don't want to set hairs running and saying that you go into a prison and suddenly someone turns up and say, "Hey, do you want to know how to build an IED?"
Yeah, that's interesting. But again, it may be a matter of luck that it hasn't happened. Should we need to tackle more of this issue? Can we talk about how the legislation is working? We had the vote in Parliament last week for Palestine Action to become a proscribed terrorist organisation, along with the likes of Hamas and Hezbollah and others. What difference does that make, other than we did see a demonstration at the weekend where people are holding up saying, they oppose genocide in Gaza and they support Palestine Action, and 29 people, they were lawyers and a university lecturer and others who were arrested for this because both membership and support for such an organisation is a crime. But does that change anything?
I think it does. I mean, if you think about what the government said, so they said that in each of the 45 police areas, there was a Palestine Action presence. And they have a website with a list of targets. And they had a manual which explained how to carry out covert activity. And they also offer training. Now, that's quite a big phenomenon to deal with, if you like, just using the ordinary criminal law. And I think what the authorities must have decided is we need to have these extra powers so that you can intervene a bit earlier. Otherwise, I mean, people make the argument, and it's a completely, reasonable argument to make. Look, deal with these people using normal criminal law. They carry out an attack on a plane, arrest them for criminal damage. But it's the fact that there's so much planning, and it's very difficult for the authorities to get ahead when you've got any number of, presumably thousands of targets that are some way connected to Israel or the defence industry, and it's impossible to stop that. So I think it's about what the authorities would call the tools that it gives. Then, of course, there's the question of, is it an unfair attack on protest? Is this going too far? I mean, look, my own view, and obviously I'm just a commentator on this and I review it, is that you've got to keep threat neutral. And quite a lot of people say to me, surely this particular cause, you've got to give them some sort of exemption because of what's going on in Gaza. Surely you've got to recognise there's a paramount need to stop military jets and assistance to Israel. That's the cause. To which my response is that may be the case, but people can obviously articulate their views, but they shouldn't use serious violence, damage to property.
No, because we have the vote. We have the vote here. And what do you make of people likening organisations like this to the suffragettes? And of course, the suffragettes, 100 years ago, didn't have the vote.
No, I think that's right. I mean, the suffragettes, on the face of it, would fall within the definition of terrorism. So, I mean, I'm reviewing the law that we have. They, I think, probably went beyond Palestine action, you could say, because running in front of a jockey, the jockey could fall off and hurt themselves and were putting people at risk.
Yep.
And the same is obviously true of Nelson Mandela. It's the biggest problem in terrorism studies is how to identify whether Nelson Mandela was a terrorist or not. And in almost all legal respects, he is. But that crucial point that you make is that there was no way of participating in a democracy to try and change minds.
Which is a very, very, very big difference. In terms of a lot of people raising issues, it's come up, we're discussing about criminality, when we're discussing benefits, cost to the country, taxes and all of that. But I think in relation to the terror threat, that's also an issue. How concerned are you, as someone who's spent so much time looking into this, as a Casey, that about the terror threat that is posed by having the mass illegal migration we've got on our borders, and so many of the people arriving are young men from war-torn areas where there is, for instance, a lot of Islamist extremism who are coming to this country. We often don't know who they are, where they're from. We know the security services have identified, they believe, there are certainly people coming across the channel through this method to get to this country. But how concerned are you about that threat to us on our safety?
No, it will increase the threat because the majority, say, of just to take prescribed organisations are Islamist, and they are based in or preoccupied about unstable parts of the world. And people tend to come into this country as economic migrants or as genuine refugees because they're coming from very unstable parts of the world. And so there's a correlation, isn't there, between the places that people tend to come from, like Afghanistan and the instance of terrorism. And I think it's a fair point to say that if you've been exposed, even as a victim, to terrorism, then that may make you a slightly more risky proposition when you arrive into the UK. So I think all of that is entirely accurate and fair. I mean, in my last annual report, I went to Manston, which is where they hold the people who've arrived on the small boats, and I made some critical comments about the fact that there wasn't an ability to screen everyone as quickly as they needed to. I mean, the authorities are obviously aware about this because I speak to them all the time, but it's definitely a factor, yeah.
Really interested to talk to you. Jonathan Hall, Casey, thank you very much indeed. Always work as an independent review of terrorism legislation. We need people to do reforming this. Some looking at it. Sam Armstrong, what do you make of that?
Well, I thought his remarks on migration were very interesting, very straightforward. He says, look, the more of these people, especially from the most dangerous parts of the world, turn up on our shores, the greater the risks we're going to have, that we're going to face. And of course, the response to that is we all have to face clampdowns on our own liberties. And his job is to get that balance right, to help the government find that balance.
But I thought was what very telling. We said earlier about it being quite bleak and just saying, like, well, no, this is how we live now. But it shouldn't have to be.
No.
We chose, well, our political leaders chose this for us, didn't they? By importing this problem. This wasn't a problem until some years ago. But there we are. Love to hear your thoughts on that. 12:49 is the time. Up next, we're going to be talking about those Texas floods and the battle between Democrats and Republicans over whether or not this was down to climate change. Numerous children have lost their lives. Is it anything to do with climate change? Well, we'll find out next. This is Talk.
I think we are still seeing individuals prepared to kill themselves in the commission of a terrorist act, but what we're not seeing is that it come to fruition. The security services have a much better idea of whom to look for and what to look for than they did have 20 years ago, when it was all, you know, rather hazy and there was no joined up thinking.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 12:52 is the time. Alex Phillips is going to be here in just a couple of minutes. So rare I get to be in the same studio as her. She's standing in for Ian Collins at 1 o'clock. First up, though, let's talk more about those Texas floods. Absolutely horrific scenes over the weekend, which have left a horrible death toll. Already we're looking at a death toll of 80. Some say it could be as high as 100. And it involves 28 children, including a bunch of primary school-age little girls at a Christian summer camp on the banks of the River Guadalupe after it burst its banks on Friday. Absolutely horrific scenes. If you've not seen any of the footage, it is quite extraordinary how fast this river just absolutely, it rose 7 feet from 7 feet to 29 feet over just a few hours. In some of the footage, it's just absolutely devastating in terms of the damage that was done so quickly. But there's a massive big row going on in the States right now about the cause of this flash flood. Well, let's talk to Andrew Montford, who's director of Net Zero Watch and joins us now. Very good afternoon to you, Andrew.
Good afternoon, Julia.
This is absolutely devastating flood, but very sadly, it's not the first time this has happened, and it probably won't be the last time this happens. But is it down to climate change, as has been claimed in many of the broadcasts about this? Well, this is a terrible impact of climate change, is how this is often routinely reported. But is that the case?
No, it's not. While it is obviously a tragedy, and it is absolutely appalling, you can't pin an individual weather event like this on climate change.
Yeah.
What you would have to do is to look at trends in floods, and then you might be in with a chance of trying to pin it on climate change. But the fact is there's very little by way of trends in climate change. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which sort of produces the official reports on these kinds of things, says that essentially there is no significant trend. It's a bit shy about saying whether it's up a bit or down a bit, but what they're saying is it's not big enough for you to be able to distinguish it from natural variability. And there is a lot of natural variability in these kinds of weather events, not just floods, but also droughts and hurricanes and all this kind of stuff.
And then, of course, we get them on the TV much more now, and there's this harrowing footage as well. You can see the floodplain, you know, the floods just rising so quickly, and it becomes much more real to us than something we hear about 3 days later in the news and don't see any live footage of, don't we? There's been a big debate about whether or not this was also, we could have saved many of these lives, particularly these children at this summer holiday camp, if there had been more warnings, and if those warnings had been listened to, because this is an area that it's known to flood when there is heavy rainfall. I think the month's rain in a few hours fell. There's nowhere for the rain to go in the earth there. It just comes straight down. The river floods. And that there were some warnings through 3 hours beforehand before people were told to leave, but people simply didn't obey those warnings.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you can't sort of legislate against people ignoring warnings.
Because they're not taking the warning seriously. They don't realise where they are is a risk.
Yeah, that's right, and that is always a possibility. And this is, I guess, the problem that legislators and administrators have is how far do you go with trying to scare people? I mean, we know that if you try to scare people too much or too often, or you try to play safe, then eventually those warnings do start to fall on deaf ears anyway, because they just go, oh well, you're just trying to scaremonger again, and you can't stop your life. I mean, I think in reality, people probably have to accept that these things are going to happen. As you said at the top of the piece, it's not the last flood we're going to have, and it's probably not the last deaths from flooding that we're going to have. And that's just the way things.
But in the last 100 years, we have seen an incredible change in the number of deaths that we're seeing from natural disasters like floods, like earthquakes, tornadoes, and hurricanes. That actually we're seeing, isn't it fallen by 99% in the last 100 years? So our ability to not just to control nature but escape the worst excesses of nature is getting better, not worse.
Absolutely, flooding is something we are very good at. We build flood defences. The village where I live flooded incredibly badly just after the millennium. And they've put in flood defences and nothing has happened since. Yeah. We're very good at dealing with these things, which is, as you say, this shows up in the data. 100 years ago, 200 years ago, if you had a major flooding, then you had people dying by the thousands. I mean, you look at China a few centuries ago, you were getting hundreds of thousands of people killed in floods, and that just doesn't happen anymore.
Because of humans' ability to deal with these things.
Yeah, and those good old fossil fuels as well.
Yeah, people hate that, but that's the reality. Andrew Montfort, Director of Net Zero Watch, thank you so much. 12:58 is the time. Sam Armstrong, it is the case. I mean, people will constantly go, BBC, of course, ravages due to climate change, but actually exploiting for political purposes the deaths of these little girls.
It's sick. And how must the parents of these few girls feel to see that their daughter's death are being used as a political football by people who don't know them, know nothing about them, know nothing about that camp, probably wouldn't even have liked them very much. I mean, let's be clear, they were going to a Christian girls' camp in Texas. The sickness required to politicise this at a moment like this.
Oh, well, I'll be accused of it, but no, I'm just trying to put some facts out there. It's an absolute tragedy. Heart goes out to those families. But let's why don't we, again, like with terrorism, why don't we prevent the next thing by actually using the resources we've got? Hugely grateful to you, Sam Armstrong. Always so great to have you on the show. I'm so excited. I never get to see her in the studio. But Alex Phillips is here in Collins. Hello.
I feel like